In February 1959, a group of 9 Soviet tourists went missing in the mountains of the northern Urals. 2 weeks later, their bodies were found at the base of Mount Oturton, which in the language of the indigenous people meant the Mountain of the Dead. The place was named after the leader of the expedition, the Dyatlov Pass. Many years later, American student Holly King became so interested in this case that she decided to gather a new group and go to this mysterious place. The catalyst was a film about an expedition by American scientists who tried to solve the mystery of the Dyatlov group's death but achieved no success. Holly's professor suggested she take up this case for her psychology project, and she invited her friend Jensen to work on it as a film director. They applied for and won a grant. The professor mentioned that she first learned about these events from a novella by Soviet journalist Yarovoy, who soon died in a car accident after the book's release. Jensen suspected that this was how the authorities tried to cover up something terrible. And although people now know a lot about the events of those years, the complete picture remains a mystery. The most common explanation is hypothermic dementia. Although this can happen to those exposed to freezing, in this case, all 9 experienced tourists started undressing at the same time, which is simply impossible. Another frequent explanation is an avalanche. But if they heard the avalanche, why did they sit near the camp for 3 hours without shoes? So there are many answers to this question, one of which involves the secrets of the Russian military, making it seem that the truth will never be known. The first stage of the journey is a flight from Oregon to Chelyabinsk, from where the group will head to the Mountain of the Dead, named by the Mansi people due to a series of unexplained deaths and mysterious disappearances. So the expedition included sound engineer Denise, climber Andy, president of the Northwest Pathfinders Association, who has conquered all the steep peaks in the USA, and his friend Hauser, who spent a whole year conquering the Himalayas. After gathering the group, the guys began to prepare, buying rations, studying maps, and training in the mountains. On January 25th, the team set off. Sometime later, news broke across all U.S. TV channels about the disappearance of 5 Oregon students in the Ural Mountains. Rescuers managed to find their belongings, tents, backpacks, and other equipment. A Russian TV correspondent reported details about the more than strange disappearance of the group of American documentarians, although experts are constructing their versions of the reasons for the disappearance. In winter, the temperature here can drop to -50 degrees, with strong, piercing winds, whose direction constantly changes. This means that if a person walks against the wind and thinks they are walking straight, they might actually be walking in circles. There are speculations about the intervention of some extraterrestrial devices, which many witnesses saw in these places, or even about the appearance of the Yeti. The Mansi elders recall rumbling and fiery balls over these mountains on the days when the Dyatlov group disappeared. They consider these places a portal to the other world. The students wanted to repeat the infamous Dyatlov expedition, and it seems they succeeded. Rescuers managed to find a camera that captured the last days of the documentarians' lives. A group of hackers posted frames on their portal, showing Holly talking about the darkness that followed her from the open door, while Jensen calms the girl, although she is sure they will not get out of this place. The action shifts to a month earlier, when lively and cheerful students are traveling to the Urals. On the train, they are having fun, hoping for success and worldwide fame. Andy is proud of his acquisition, a phone with GPS, which will help them navigate the mountains, while Holly conducts tests to find out people's desire to hike. Soon the group arrives in the town of Evdel, where they plan to interview the only surviving member of the Dyatlov expedition, who left the route due to illness, but now he is held in a psychiatric hospital. However, doctors do not allow the Americans inside, and they only manage to see the old man showing them a note saying, "Leave." In the evening, the group goes to a local bar. The bartender pours them local moonshine and says that the Dyatlov group stopped here in 1959 and drank the same thing as the Americans. There, they meet Sergei, who speaks English and drives them to the village of Visa, the last point before heading out on the road. The man tells them that his aunt, an English teacher, participated in the search for the Dyatlov group. She claims that in 1959, not 9 but 11 bodies were found near the Mountain of the Dead. Next to the last 2, which looked very different from the others, lay some unknown device. But none of this was mentioned in the reports. After the conversation, the guys set off on foot. At night they stop and set up camp, as the weather begins to change. Hauser prepares a camp dinner, and the guys have fun joking with each other. At night, people see strange lights in the sky and recall reports of orange flashes over the Dyatlov camp, but they decide they still won't be able to solve this mystery and go to sleep. However, in the morning, they noticed numerous barefoot tracks of unusual sizes around the tents, resembling human ones. The main thing is that the tracks have no beginning or end, as if some creatures did not come to the camp but flew in. Nevertheless, they set off to explore the area. Soon the students find an abandoned meteorological station, around which the same tracks are found. And in the station's booth lies a torn-out human tongue. Denise panics and asks Holly to leave. But Jensen tells her about a pass in China where animals and birds crash into cliffs and people go insane and die. It is said to happen because of the sound of the wind. Holly admits that she had a similar dream. Mountains, snow, and some door with darkness behind it. And then she heard about the Dyatlov Pass and realized that she would find out everything here. During their conversation, the camera captures two human figures running far in the background. Later they go further and unexpectedly come to the Dyatlov Pass. Once, 9 people set up camp in this very place, had dinner, and went to sleep. But somewhere between 9 and 11 at night, something that the authorities called an unknown irresistible force forced them to leave the tent in such horror that they cut it from the inside and ran into the night, where it was minus 28 degrees. Holly marks the places where their bodies were found. The first deceased, Rustem Slobodin, Igor Dyatlov, the group's leader and the most experienced tourist. It was probably his idea to leave the tent. Zinaida Kolmogorova was closest to the camp, the only victim who resisted, as her tongue and most of her oral cavity were torn out. Lyudmila Dubinina, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, Alexander Zolotaryov, Alexander Kolevatov. The cause of death for all was called hypothermia, but Rustem and Nikolai had serious skull injuries, and Lyudmila and Alexander had broken ribs, which was not observed in others. There were no signs of an attack on any of the bodies, no external injuries. Something broke the skulls of 2 men and the ribs of 2 people without leaving even bruises. Moreover, Alexander's body had a high level of radiation. But from where, and why only on him? Georgy Krivonashenko and Yuri Doroshenko, when others ran away, sat by the extinguished fire and froze to death. While Holly is conducting research, Andy is surprised that their group somehow covered 22 kilometers in one day. Everyone's watches, GPS, and even the compass stopped working. Some guys suggest leaving the mountains before it's too late, but Holly persuades them to stay and finish the film. At night, Holly notices that the Geiger counter starts signaling, and together with Jensen, they go up the slope, where they find a high but not deadly level of radiation. Unexpectedly, the students discover the entrance to a bunker, closed with an iron door. Holly wants to open it, although Jensen is categorically against it, as Russian authorities did not build it here for nothing, closing something dangerous in the mountain. However, it turns out that the door is open and just a bit frozen. Holly asks Jensen not to tell the others about the discovery to avoid causing panic among the already scared team. They return to the camp and settle for the night. Around 6 a.m., a huge avalanche roars down the mountains, killing Denise, injuring Andy, and sweeping away the tents and almost all supplies. At first, everyone quarrels, trying to find the culprit of the tragedy, but gradually they realize it was an attempt on their expedition. They help Andy and try to contact the outside world somehow. Holly tells them about the bunker, which enrages Hauser since they are freezing here in the snow, while it might be warm there. The students launch a signal flare and wait for help. After some time, 2 people arrive, claiming they saw the flare, but Andy does not believe them, since they have no backpacks and could not have reached here so quickly. He stays to hold them back while the others are ordered to run. The strangers shoot Andy and wound Hauser. Holly, Jensen, and the wounded Hauser barely manage to get into the bunker. The strangers pursue them, but the students close the door. The Americans turn on the lighting, although it is dim and flickering. Running through the tunnels, they find a laboratory full of various devices and documents, among which are old journals with the names of people who died in the line of duty. There are also details about the famous American experiment with the teleportation of the USS Eldridge. Hauser feels unwell and stays put, as Holly promises to find an exit in return for him. The students continue on alone. Soon, Holly and Jensen find the bodies of soldiers who recently died. One of them is missing a tongue, presumably the one they found earlier at the station. But the other bodies are very old and even skeletonized. The 2 open another door, behind which they sense movement. Suddenly, under the flashlight, they see exactly the same camera they have. Moreover, it has their recordings on it. Jensen recalls the teleportation of the Eldridge, which likely happened to them too. At that time, many soldiers mutated, turning into something incomprehensible. At that moment they hear Hauser's screams and rush to him, finding their friend being torn apart by two humanoid mutants. Noticing the newcomers, the mutants attack them. Resembling skeletons covered in skin, the mutants seem to possess the ability to teleport as they appear out of nowhere in any place. Jensen and Holly leave their friend's body, run out of the bunker, and close the door. To their surprise, the mutants do not chase after them. The survivors turn around, and instead of a snowy field, they see a fossil forming a huge round tunnel. The students realize that this is the path for the mutants' teleportation. Holly throws debris inside and sees that the passage is activated. Looking around, the couple finds drawings on the walls made by the local inhabitants and understands that they discovered this place, built by an ancient civilization once living under these mountains. Such portals can be anything, even weapons scattered around the world, which explains many great mysteries. They do not know where it might take them, to which space or time, but Jensen suggests they need to mentally focus on the place they intend to go. And it will work. The only place that they both clearly imagine is the surroundings of their camp near the bunker entrance. They have no choice but to head into the tunnel. The plot shifts back to 1959, when a Soviet girl from the search team finds their bodies and is very surprised because the rescuers have already found all 9 participants of the expedition. Approaching Soviet soldiers take the bodies to the bunker, while one major picks up the Americans' camera, not understanding what it is. The soldier wants to place the Americans with the other bodies, but the major orders them to be placed in a separate room for examination by a doctor. Undressing the deceased, the soldiers are astonished by the unusual clothing for the 1950s. The naked bodies of Holly and Jensen, now looking like mutant bodies, are hung on hooks in a separate cell. The sergeant places the camera under a light. When everyone leaves, the creatures begin to revive. The man lifts his head and looks at the woman. She directs her gaze at the camera, and an angel wing tattoo is visible on the right side of her neck, the same one Holly had. Despite some inconsistencies, the storyline adheres to most known facts, although the American-Russian creative team skillfully handled the mystified legacy of the USSR. However, the found footage effect combined with acting, special effects, and magnificent locations is good enough to ensure the thriller's watchability.
Hello everyone, today we'll be talking about a science fiction monster film called Underground Monster. Be ready for some spoilers ahead. Somewhere deep inside the underground tunnel of a city, the workers are building a subway station, but accidentally finds a strange hole that's releasing a terrible smell. They decide to venture inside to investigate further, and are shocked to see the enormous amounts of garbage piling everywhere like mountains. What they don't realize is that they're surrounded by huge insects, while a giant tentacle follows them in the shadows. The people continue moving forwards and eventually find something very strange, which appears to be a massive egg. Before they can figure out what to do next, the CEO of the company has decided to visit the area personally. After learning about what happened, the workers show him the strange egg that they found, and the man tells the people to take the object immediately, thinking that it may be worth a fortune. However, a worker whose name is Don has wandered off by himself and eventually ends up getting lost as a result. Very soon, his flashlight begins to malfunction, causing him to try and fix the machine, not realizing that he's waking up something terrifying from behind. The giant creature gets up slowly as the man turns around from hearing the sound, causing a loud scream that can be heard by everyone else. The people rush towards their friend immediately and finds the terrifying man who keeps on telling them that a monster is nearby. They begin hearing noises everywhere around them as all the workers have come together while trying to fend off the incoming threats. Suddenly, a giant tentacle shoots out and grabs onto their friend before pulling him away in blinding speed. The CEO shouts for everyone to run, causing all the people to rush the other way as they're knocked away by the giant tentacles like ragdolls. The people scream in fear as the creature continues sending the workers into the air and toppling the structures nearby. The monster eventually reveals itself as Don tries to save his friend, but the man is quickly grabbed onto by the enemy's tentacle and thrown away into the abyss. Don screams hopelessly while all the garbage mountains topple onto the ground, forcing the big man to use up all his cardio and escapes the tunnel by the skin of his teeth. He turns around immediately, only to see that the entrance has been completely shut off, causing him to cry for his friend's death. At the same time, a young boy whose name is Jake is playing alongside his father Jing, who's picking up all the nails on the floor that almost flattened his tires. Very soon, they begin seeing all the birds flying away from the area as a loud honking can be heard coming towards them. Jing carries the son away immediately as a truck is rushing towards them, driven by a worker from the construction site who's trying to get away from the monster. The vehicle runs over the nails while shaking violently and dropping off its cargo in the process before escaping down the hills. The father sees this and goes to open the crate, only to see the same egg that the CEO tried to take away from the monster. Jing decides to keep the item for himself, as he believes that it must be worth a lot of money, but the son is very concerned about this mysterious object. He goes closer towards the shell while trying to listen inside, and is shocked to hear that something big is moving, but the father can only think about how much money he'll make. It turns out that Jing works inside a junkyard, and he's surprised to see a fancy red vehicle beside his home, which takes away his smile immediately. Jim begins taking off his wedding ring and brings the boy towards the building, eventually entering the house where they see a woman standing in the room. It's quickly revealed that her name is Lena, who's also the main character's ex-wife, and she's not happy about her son spending time inside this dirty place. Very soon, her new fiancé rushes inside and pulls out a collection of fancy toys, causing the young boy to run towards him immediately as the father nearly spits out his drink. The woman looks at the main character like he owes her alimony while blaming the man for being so useless and poor, telling him that he doesn't deserve to be the boy's father. What's even worse, she has decided to take the boy to another province so that her son would have a better future. The fiancé tells the main character that he'll bring the boy to the best private school so that he would not end up picking garbage like his old man. This causes Jin to punch him right in the face as the woman tries desperately to stop the violence, but the fight quickly becomes ridiculous while both men begin using their teeth. Lena is forced to sit down in disbelief, eventually causing the woman to take her son away as the fiancé chases after them like a weasel. Later that night, while Jing's father is looking after the man's wounds, their dog begins noticing that something is wrong as the animal continuously circles around the truck. What they don't realize is that the egg inside the vehicle is starting to hatch, causing all the animals to go crazy around the area. The grandpa decides to go investigate the yard, thinking that wild animals are looking through the trash, but is surprised to see that no one is inside the area. He goes towards the truck that's somehow shaking by itself as sticky liquids are dropping onto the ground. The man goes towards the windows carefully and is shocked to see a tentacle inside the vehicle. The old man runs towards Jing and tells him about the creature, while the main character slowly walks towards the truck, only to see that the entire vehicle has vanished. Suddenly, an object falls towards the ground, causing them to look up into the sky, and they're shocked to see that the truck has been lifted into the air by numerous tentacles. The creature senses the approaching people and retreats into the vehicle, causing the truck to fall down as a result. Before they can figure out what to do next, the monster attacks the people right away, causing Jing to run back into the building immediately and almost locking out his father as well. What's even worse, they begin hearing another car approaching this place, which turns out to be the man's ex-wife. The main character watches in shock as Jake runs out from the vehicle while heading straight towards the monster, making the father charge out immediately as he yells for the boy to stop. However, his efforts are clearly too late as the boy is grabbed onto by a massive tentacle and is pulled away in blinding speed. The mother rushes towards Jake and tries to pull out her son, but the monster is obviously too strong as it refuses to let go no matter what. Luckily, Jin charges in with a knife and cuts off the tentacle immediately while freeing the boy at the same time. They grab onto the gasoline and the mother pours the liquids all over the truck before she throws the lighter towards the creature and covering the monster in flames. The animal struggles desperately inside the fire as it slowly turns into a barbecue squid, while the father realizes that his ex-wife has just burned away his last bit of savings. After surviving the monster's attack, The father wonders how the creature got in there, and the son tells the man immediately that it was from the egg that he took. Their conversation is quickly interrupted by the fiancé, who charges in after receiving the woman's phone call and quickly sees that no one is harmed. He becomes angry at Lena for calling him over and disturbing his business meeting, thinking that everything was grossly exaggerated by the woman. Before they can finish arguing, the entire place begins to shake as all the lights are malfunctioning at the same time. The main character looks outside the window immediately and quickly sees an even bigger monster inside the yard, causing the men to stumble back in fear. Very soon, the entire building begins to crumble as the people see the tentacles crawling over the windows and surrounding the entire structure. Everyone looks up in fear as the creature starts breaking down the roof and eventually revealing its enormous face towards the humans. The monster tries fiercely to get into the building and starts breaking through the windows, causing the people to scramble in the chaos. The fiancé rushes outside for his life and leaving the woman behind, while all his bodyguards begin to run away as well. The monster roars furiously at the humans while throwing the people into the air and eventually manages to grab onto the fiancé by using its massive tentacle. The creature brings the man closer and begins inspecting him carefully, but eventually loses interest in the human as it throws him away like garbage. The monster turns the attention towards the family and blocks their only way to escape before shooting its tentacle towards the people and pulling Jake away from his mother. The animal looks at the boy closely and eventually notices a familiar scent, causing it to rush away from the area as the people scream helplessly for their son. Their efforts prove to be useless as the creature jumps into the ground, and the people soon realize that the monster has disappeared alongside the boy. The father cries in despair as the mother is stunned in shock, and the man continues digging the ground by using his hand, even knowing that there's no hope of getting back his son. Sometimes later, after Jin has finally accepted the truth, he tries to go and comfort his ex-wife, but only results in the woman blaming him for everything that's happened. Just when everything seems to be hopeless, a strange man rushes into the building alongside his student, who has tracked the monster all the way here. When they find the main character and his ex-wife, the young girl inquires about the monster immediately, as they have been looking for the creature this whole time. It turns out that the old man is actually a professor of marine biology, and he examines the monster's tentacle carefully in front of everyone. The man thinks that the people must have killed the creature's offspring, as the monster was probably searching for its baby by using its smell. It's very likely that the creature has mistaken their son for its own child, and has taken the boy into its nest, but this also means that Jake is probably still alive. At the same time, the young boy is slowly regaining his consciousness and soon finds himself surrounded by mountains of garbage. The boy slowly gets up and tries to look for a way out, but quickly sees the giant tentacle that's responsible for taking him here. The creature approaches the human slowly and causing Jake to stumble backwards in fear, while the monster towers over the small boy and forcing him into a corner. The animal eventually opens its mask and revealing a terrifying smile that's capable of giving anyone nightmares for days. The creature is confused by the boy's fear and decides to lick the child by using its massive tongue, which only makes the situation even worse. The monster eventually becomes frustrated by Jake's behavior and roars furiously towards the boy while expressing its unhappiness. Suddenly, a loud music begins to play and causing the creature to look around in confusion, but it soon realizes that the noise is coming from its own belly. The monster begins to scream in pain as it falls down right in front of the boy, while Jake is unsure about what to do. The creature eventually rushes behind the huge piles of garbage and tries to spit out the noisy machine while completely ignoring the human. Jake slowly goes towards the monster as it screams in agony while lying on the ground, and the boy tells the creature that he'll help, only if he's allowed to go home afterwards. He grabs onto the wires and begins pulling with all his might as the monster struggles to spit out the object, but Jake is quickly able to take out the item that was stuck inside. The creature finally manages to get up as it stares at the boy continuously, eventually grabbing onto the human as it tries to thank Jake for saving its life. The monster slowly puts down the boy and lies back onto the ground once more as it begins resting inside the piles of garbage garbage. Meanwhile, after studying the piece of tentacle, the scientist tells the parents to give up on their son, but the father grabs onto the man and continuously begs him to help. After seeing how desperate the people are, the man finally decides to locate the creature and manages to bring back the hope inside the father's eyes. The professor brings them towards his laboratory, where he keeps numerous statues of monsters that he studies, including a giant snake and a snow monster that's over 200 meters tall. The man thinks that the only way to save the boy is to tranquilize the creature by using anesthetics that are able to put down elephants. He also developed a chemical that's capable of killing the creature, but warns the people that it should never be used unless the monster is evil in nature. On the other side, the monster begins consuming all the garbage around the area, as Jake watches in confusion, not understanding why the creature is eating trash. The boy tries to find anything that's edible, but is not able to even get a single drop of water, and is forced to watch the monster have its buffet. The creature notices that the child is hungry and begins pushing the garbage towards the boy, but only manages to make him lose his appetite instead. Jake wonders if the creature is only eating garbage because there's nothing else for food, but begins to be entertained by the monster's carefree nature as it throws the trash in the air. The creature starts laughing like a giant gorilla, while Jake begins throwing the trash at the monster's mouth and feeding the animal at the same time. The boy quickly starts bonding with the giant creature as the monster watches the little human intriguingly. Jake tries to play with the massive animal as he pretends to be Ultraman who's fighting the enemy, while the creature falls down from the boy's imaginary attack. As they're having the time of their lives, the construction worker Dawn is contemplating about all the friends that the monster has killed. He plans to take vengeance on the creature alongside all the workers who were able to survive the previous attack. Sometimes later, the boy wakes up after hearing a strange noise from behind the piles of garbage and decides to investigate the area. Suddenly, he's grabbed onto by a stranger who turns out to be a worker that survived the monster's previous attack. He tries to save the boy and plans to kill the creature, but Jake tells him to stop, as the monster would never eat any humans. The man thinks that the young boy is delusional, as all his friends are dead because of the creature. He promises to bring the boy back to his parents and begins carefully maneuvering across the monster without stepping on its tentacles and waking up the creature. However, the man's plan quickly fails as the monster wakes up after sensing their vibration and begins chasing the humans immediately. The worker grabs onto Jake and runs desperately for his life, but eventually drops the young boy by accident, which causes him to drown inside the wastewater. The man sees the approaching monster and has no choice but to run away as Jake slowly falls deeper into the pond. The worker is eventually cornered by the massive creature as a giant spider crawls towards him from behind. The tentacle monster sees this and roars furiously at the insect and causing the bug to run away, but also knocking out the human at the same time. The creature goes back towards the pond immediately and manages to save the young boy in the last moment, while slowly putting down the human onto the ground. The animal tries to wake up the boy, but Jake is not responsive at all, causing the monster to cry hopelessly as it tries desperately to save the human. At the same time, the professor is preparing to head towards the underground monster alongside the parents, and the mother goes inside the vehicle to wait for everyone else. While looking around her ex-husband's car, she quickly notices a piece of paper which still has the ring for their previous marriage. She looks at the document carefully, and it turns out that the man is actually very ill, as he's the victim of a chronic disease which causes the woman to cry immediately. When Jing eventually comes into the car, Lena demands to know why the man never told her about his health. Surprisingly, Jing never thought that it was important, as he only wanted to spend more time with Jake and to give him the best possible future that he knows he cannot offer. Their conversation is quickly interrupted by the grandpa as they head towards the underground construction site immediately to find their son. When they finally make it inside the cave, they're surprised to see a bunch of construction workers led by Dawn, who has already dug through the entrance towards the tunnel. However, the workers only want the people to leave, as they plan on releasing poison into the cave so that they can finally kill the monster. Jing hears this and tries desperately to stop them, as he believes that Jake is still alive, but Don only cares about taking vengeance for his friends who died. The main character scolds the man immediately for his recklessness, as the poison will only end up killing all the survivors. The grandpa takes the chance and sabotages the machine amidst the argument, before they quickly rush into the cave by pushing through the construction workers. The people arrive into the area that's filled by mountains of garbage, and the assistant begins tracing the monster's signal by using her detector. They continue forwards by following the scientist, eventually making it towards the giant monster who's continuously watching over the boy. Jing sees this and tries to run towards the child, but the old man stops him immediately as they can't fight the creature head-on. The scientist decides to use the tranquilizer as he aims towards the giant creature and fires the shot, but is knocked away by the monster who realized their presence a long time ago. The creature screams furiously towards the humans, but gets hit by a second shot that was fired by the main character, while the woman throws even more chemicals at the monster. The animal stares at the people in anger and soon decides to put the young boy to a safer location before turning towards the humans to battle. Luckily, the tranquilizers begin to kick in, causing the monster to pass out immediately as it quickly falls towards the ground. The parents rush towards Jake as they climb onto the piles of junk, while the scientist is amazed by the giant creature and begins taking a sample of blood. However, the man quickly realizes that something is wrong as the monster has regained consciousness already and is furious at the people for invading its nest. The creature turns towards the parents right away and tries to grab onto the boy, but is knocked away by a flying arrow that was shot by the construction workers. All the people begin to surround the monster as they aim to take the creature's life, but this only enrages the animal even more. The monster launches the tentacles towards the workers and knocking the people into the air, but the humans quickly start to retaliate as they begin throwing hooks onto the creature. They manage to hold down the monster temporarily as the others have found the deadly poison that the scientists have brought. The workers plan to use the weapons against their enemy while the old man tries desperately to stop the people, but only ends up failing as a result. The monster screams furiously towards the attackers while Dawn takes the chemical and throws the weapon right into the creature's face. This causes tremendous damage to the animal while Dawn continues trying to kill the monster as he shoots a massive arrow into the creature's chest. The humans are quickly gaining the advantage of the fight as Jake begins to slowly wake up and is shocked to see that the people are killing his friend. The workers continue to throw the chemicals at the creature, which is quickly killing the massive animal, causing the boy to scream in tears as he begs the people to stop. The monster finally hears the boy's voice and is happy to see that the child is still alive, which gives it hope once again to fight off the humans. The creature gathers all its energy and tosses the people into the air while throwing them onto the garbage mountains. A worker sees this and begins lighting up the dynamite, but ends up tossing the bomb towards the parents and blowing up the area, which knocks off the boy at the same time. Luckily, the monster is able to grab onto Jake in the last moment and saving the boy's life right in front of everyone, despite all the injuries that the animal sustained. However, Jin quickly notices that something is wrong as a mountain of garbage begins falling towards the boy, but the monster rushes in right away to protect the human. This gravely injures the giant creature while Jake watches hopelessly at his friend suffering and realizing that the monster is very hurt. Things become even worse as all the construction workers begin to surround the injured animal as they vow to take vengeance for their friends. The people start to attack the creature by piercing through its belly, while the boy screams hopelessly for his friend, but the workers are blinded by rage as they all refuse to listen. The monster looks at Jake and tries to reach out towards the boy one last time, but Dawn stabs the creature right in the heart and kills the animal in front of everyone. The man pulls out the spear, revealing all the garbage that the monster ate, but there's no trace of human bodies anywhere. Very soon, the survivors appear in front of the workers and tells the man that the monster did not eat anyone, as the giant spiders were the ones responsible for killing the humans. The workers drop all their weapons to help their friends, while Don slowly turns around to look at the creature and realizes that he has become the true monster. Sometimes later, Jing is finally brought together with his son, while Lena begins to look at her husband in a different way. The woman decides to give the man a second chance, as she plans to marry him once more, and the two embraces in happiness while Jake watches from afar. The man is later interviewed by the news reporter about his encounter with the monster, but the man refuses to call the creature by that name, as it never killed anyone. He begins describing all the lives that human beings have destroyed by killing the environment, and questions the viewers who they think the real monster is. So what do you guys think about this movie? Let me know in the comments below, and if you like my videos, please press like and subscribe for more. I'll see you guys next time.
Every day, a young fisherman named Syracuse sets out to fish off the coast of Ireland. One day, he finds a young woman in his nets. He helps her, and when she regains consciousness, he is relieved to see that she seems unharmed. However, she behaves quite strangely and refuses to go to the hospital. She also can't remember her name, which Syracuse attributes to amnesia. He takes her to his late mother's house, offers her some sandwiches, and suggests she stay there for a while. He needs to go see his daughter. Annie lives with his ex-wife, Maura, and today he has to take the girl to dialysis. While the procedure is ongoing, he tells Annie a story about a fisherman who caught a woman from the sea. Annie explains that it was likely a selkie, a creature she learned about at school. Sometimes they come ashore until the sea calls them back. After the procedure, Syracuse takes Annie back to her mother, who is eager to show her the new electric wheelchair she received. Annie shows off the chair to her father, but her mother immediately criticizes him for not talking to the doctor about a new kidney for their daughter. The next morning, Syracuse finds a woman washing clothes in a stream, singing in an unknown language. She asks if she can come with him, and he lets her board his boat. On the way, she says her name is Ondine, which means from the water. Soon, Syracuse's boat stops for lobster fishing, but the baskets come up empty. Ondine begins to sing a song that Syracuse has never heard before, and suddenly every basket is filled with a catch. She helps him pull them out and is surprised when he throws the smaller ones and extras back into the sea. However, she flatly refuses to go with him to the market. He sells the lobsters to the astonished buyers and purchases a dress at a store. Then he heads to pick up Annie from school. On the way home, he continues the story about the fisherman and the woman from the sea. She sings to the fish and he catches them. Both are happy. Annie thinks it's a dream because everything seems like his dream coming true. Moreover, no one knows the language she sings in. After dropping his daughter off at home, Syracuse heads back, not noticing that the curious girl is following him. He gives Ondine some clothes and food when he reaches the house and finds her talking to his father, who asks how long she'll be staying in his house. Hearing that it's up to him, Syracuse decides she'll stay forever to live with him happily ever after, like in the fairy tale he's been making up with Annie. After seeing everything with her own eyes, Annie goes to the library and asks for books about selkies. Meanwhile, Syracuse goes to church to confess, admitting he's an alcoholic, even though he hasn't drunk for over 2 years. Lately, he's been haunted by a dream where he attends the funeral of his ex-wife's new husband, Alex, after which he reunites with Maura, who still struggles with alcohol problems. The priest advises him to see a psychologist, but Syracuse reminds him of the secrecy of confession and tells him that he pulled a woman out of the water with his net. Now he's hiding her from everyone else. The priest asks him to come to Mass as there's no other way he can help him. Meanwhile, Annie is studying legends about selkies. Ondine cleans the cottage and then examines the new things Syracuse brought her. She's particularly intrigued by the fishnet stockings, which she stretches over one hand, making them look webbed. The next day, Annie goes to her grandmother's cottage and sees Ondine swimming. The girl boldly approaches the shore and declares that she knew all along. The story about the fisherman and the selkie isn't a fairy tale. Annie tells her about her illness and asks her to heal her, but Ondine doesn't know magic and says so. The girl asks a lot of questions, and Ondine likes the lively and straightforward child. Annie asks her to always tell the truth, because what's the point of friendship otherwise? She's very curious about what it's like underwater. Is it better or worse than here? Ondine says it varies, but singing is easier there. Annie shares everything she's learned about selkies from the books. They can stay on land for up to 7 years until they find happiness with a human. Then she abruptly shifts the conversation to her grandmother because her father still misses her very much. Remembering her mother, Annie prepares to go home, and Ondine asks her to come back again. Syracuse also goes to the library to borrow books about selkies, only to find out that Annie has already taken them. Meanwhile, Annie meets up with the neighborhood kids who show off their bikes, and she lets one of the girls play with her wheelchair before it runs out of power and rolls into the water. The kids abandon Annie and she has to make her way home where she's met by Alex. He recharges her battery and tells her that selkies were invented in his homeland of Scotland, but the girl insists that Undine speaks a different language. Meanwhile, Syracuse finds Undine on a pontoon in the middle of the bay and offers to take her back to his boat. He asks her to hold the tiller, but when a patrol boat speeds by, Undine hides and steers the boat with her foot. Syracuse teases her, noting that she manages just fine with her feet. She starts singing again as he pulls up his net and discovers it's filled with a bountiful catch of salmon, which his nets usually can't catch. Before he can fully enjoy his luck, Syracuse sees the patrol boat returning. The wildlife officers find the salmon and demand to see the nets he used to catch them. He shows them the usual nets for catching salmon, but they're completely dry, meaning he's telling the truth. However, the men notice Undine hiding in the hold. She confirms that Syracuse caught the salmon in an ordinary net, and they leave the boat. Relieved that the officers believe their story and that nothing happened when Undine was seen by people, they head to the harbor together to sell the catch. Syracuse offers to buy her a gift, and she asks for another dress, which she'll choose herself. On the way to the store, they run into Annie, who's thrilled that their story isn't just a fairy tale. The girl helps Undine pick out an outfit while the townspeople gawk at the pretty stranger through the shop window. Later, Annie arrives at her grandmother's house, which looks festive and cozy thanks to Undine's efforts. Undine offers to teach the girl how to swim, and she agrees since she'll have someone from the sea by her side. They both play in the shallow water when Undine suddenly sees something in the water and asks Annie to get on the raft. She pulls out a bundle, which Annie calls Selkie clothing. According to legend, if she buries it in the ground, she'll be able to stay on land for 7 years, provided her sea husband doesn't come for her. After listening to Annie, Undine buries the find in the greenhouse, and Annie counts the steps to remember the exact spot. Later, she tells her father about it and advises him to watch out for strangers. Meanwhile, they all head to the local festival by boat, and Undine denies Annie's claim that she can grant wishes because she's not really a selkie. Upset, Annie pretends that her wheelchair brakes have failed and falls off the pier, hoping to test the truth of her words. Undine jumps in to save her and pulls the girl to the surface. Syracuse carries Annie home and hands her over to Moore and Alex. Later, Undine tells Syracuse that the wheelchair's brakes work just fine and that Annie was testing her ability to breathe underwater. He confesses that he used to drink heavily, but one day he returned from a trip to find Annie's mother sleeping next to their unconscious child. They saved the girl, and he decided that one of them had to stay sober at all times. Meanwhile, Moore tells Annie that a dark-haired stranger has been looking for the fisherman's girlfriend, which causes the girl to have a nightmare. Meanwhile, Syracuse and Undine become intimate. Later, he goes to confession and admits to the priest that he sinned with Undine the night before, and now he fears the luck she brings because he's long lost hope for the best. He knows that something wonderful or terrible will happen, and he's afraid of both. After the conversation, the fisherman steps outside and is approached by an unknown man who starts asking questions about Undine. Syracuse ignores him and walks away. That day, he takes Annie to dialysis as usual, but when they return home, no one is there. Maura and Alex had been out drinking at the nearby pub. Syracuse takes the girl there. Finally reaching home, he finds the doors broken in and Undine nowhere to be found. Syracuse searches the shore and eventually finds her hiding. She reminds him of the Selkie's husband and says he's here to take her away. Meanwhile, the intoxicated Maura is riding her daughter's wheelchair and, despite Alex's warnings, is determined to make it home on it. Syracuse hides Undine in a secret cave behind the waterfall, offering to grant her a wish, but her only wish is for Annie to get well, so he wishes for her to be able to stay. Meanwhile, the man searching for Undine is driving around town and gets into a car accident, colliding with a car driven by the intoxicated Maura. Alex is thrown through the windshield. Annie, however, manages to buckle up, but still sustains injuries. Syracuse and Undine, driving by, recognize the car. Syracuse screams and rushes at the medics as they load Annie onto a stretcher to take her to the hospital. Later, they find the girl in the hospital and learn that she's undergoing an immediate kidney transplant from Alex, who, by a stroke of luck, was a compatible match. Meanwhile, the unknown man meets Undine in the hallway. He wonders why she speaks their language because neither of them belongs here. The sea spat her out, but this is not their world. The woman asks him to return home without her. The next morning, Annie wakes up and immediately asks where Undine is. Syracuse reassures her that they'll see her soon. Sometime later, a cremation ceremony for Alex takes place. Maura scatters his ashes over the sea, regretting that this time she can't blame her ex-husband for everything. She asks him to take Annie, but demands that he get rid of Undine, and she forces her husband to drink to Alex's soul. In a drunken state, Syracuse goes to the boat where Ondine is hiding and, calling her a selkie, takes her out to sea, where he demands that she return to her husband and sing her songs to him. He takes her to the foot of the lighthouse and continues to insist that she needs to leave. He leaves her there and prepares to sail away, believing that life isn't a fairy tale. People and selkies can't be together. Ondine asks for a chance to say goodbye to Annie, but he sails away. As dusk falls, the log she's sitting on gives her silhouette the appearance of a woman with a tail. Waiting for nightfall, she jumps into the sea. In the morning, the priest wakes up a depressed Syracuse, who realizes he's made a big mistake. He brings Annie from the hospital to his home. The girl comforts him, saying that Ondine will come back because she left something here. Later, Annie watches TV, where the Icelandic band Sigur Rós is performing, and suddenly Syracuse recognizes the words. He realizes that Ondine was an ordinary woman and rushes to the lighthouse. At first, he can't find her anywhere and runs along the shore, shouting, but soon he sees a fire where Ondine is warming herself. At first, she says she's a sea creature who found her magical clothes and buried them so she could stay forever with the family she loves. But Syracuse demands the truth, and then Ondine admits that she was a courier delivering illegal substances from Romania. She was in a boat with a backpack full of substances when the police closed in. Her guard threw her into the water because he couldn't swim. She swam until she couldn't anymore, and then she drowned. But she got caught in Syracuse's net. The girl tells him her real name, Ioana. The fisherman takes her home, where criminals are already waiting, having taken Annie hostage. Syracuse tries to fight them off, but he can't handle two armed men. The girl told him the story about the selkie's clothing buried in the greenhouse, and the men demand to be shown the spot. Everyone heads to the greenhouse to dig up the goods, but they find nothing because Annie has hidden the selkie's clothing elsewhere. Ondine promises to stay with Annie, and she admits that she hid the package in the lobster crate. Everyone heads to the boat, but when the criminals lift the basket, Annie reminds Ondine that she's a selkie, and they are not. Ondine throws one of the villains overboard. He drowns while Syracuse throws the other Romanian into the water, disarming him. The arriving police arrest the criminal along with Ondine, who faces deportation unless she gains citizenship, or she could get married. Later, Annie goes to confession and says that her father's getting married soon. Even though she wasn't a real selkie, but you can't marry a seal, can you? In the final scenes, a girl in a white dress and a fisherman in a suit sail off on their boat for a honeymoon, bringing to life the fairy tale about the happiness of a human in a selkie. That's where the movie ends. In the future, an unknown organization locks millions of people in bunkers where they are forced to become bloggers and conduct endless streams to get everything they need to survive.
Why us? Who were we before all this?
A young man wakes up in the middle of a gloomy room, not understanding where he is and how he got there. At first, he examines the walls, hoping to find a way out, but there is none. Then the guy notices a turned-on monitor on which one word is written: share. He tries to enter different concepts related to the word exit, but the computer deems them incorrect and again offers to share. The guy confirms this command and the broadcast immediately turns on. The guy tries to ask questions as he can't stay here long. He has a dog at home that needs to be fed and walked, and besides, he wants to drink, but there's no water. He tries to ask this question to the computer, and then an option buy appears, but the prisoner has no money and doesn't understand how he can buy water. Soon the guy realizes that real people are watching his broadcasts, but so far, he does not quite understand what he can show the viewers, so he starts to grimace, but falls and groans in pain, asking for help. The number of views sharply increases and viewers start sending donations of unknown currency with which any purchase can be made, but so far, he only has enough for a bowl of dog food which appears in an opening niche on the wall. He expresses his indignation and tries to return the bowl, but there is no such function. And then the guy starts eating, occasionally making dog barks. This brings a new wave of views and donations, and the guy allows himself to buy clothes. However, they turn out to be women's. At night, he cries in despair and misunderstanding of the situation, but pulling himself together, he starts a new broadcast, during which he dances, tumbles, and entertains the viewers in every way possible. Soon, he acquires a t-shirt and an inflatable mattress. After some time, he already has a full wardrobe and shaving tools. Days go by, and the man allows himself a good meal and even alcohol, after which he tries to smash the monitor, but all he achieves is that the broadcasts stop. The guy tries in every possible way to beg forgiveness from the computer, and not getting an answer, again demands to be released from there. And then he just cries, begging for one more chance, and when the degree of despair reaches its limit, the guy lies down on the floor to wait for the end. The monitor turns on. On the screen appears the same room in which a man is. He greets the guy and explains that there are glitches in the system, but in general, upon reaching a certain level, he gained access to the common network. And now he can communicate with others like him, bloggers. The man believes that they all work for the unknown kidnappers who locked them in the bunker. The man talks to the guy all evening about the structure of his new world. He is very verbose and often jumps to other topics, so the guy even gets tired of him. But one day he hears the man cough. He tries to contact him, and dialing his channel number, he comes across a cook teaching the audience to cook. The guy starts dialing different numbers, and it turns out that behind each number is someone's channel. The trapped people teach viewers how to feed cats, apply makeup, and take care of themselves. One of these girls, an athlete, captivates the guy's attention for a long time. Eventually, he connects with a man who is broadcasting about near-death experiences that day. Meanwhile, the young man continues his acrobatic etudes, for which he receives small donations. After one such unsuccessful somersault, he lies on his mattress, and the adult man asks him to buy food, as his time is worth money. After the young man fulfills his request, the man draws attention to their numbers. The young man is under number 14, while the man is 6395873. Does the young man really think he appeared here before him? Everyone in the network is trying to figure out who locked them up here. There are theories about aliens and space, and one boy convinced everyone that they are asleep and undergoing a test. But the man believes that bloggers have locked themselves in their own world. He himself was once married to a star who the young man also liked. They reminisce about her songs and sing them as a duet. At night, the young man again connects to the channel of the girl who does yoga, and after admiring her, sends her a donation. In the morning, the young man buys furniture for himself and again talks to the man, who continues to enlighten him. You can't stay at one level here, because then the viewers will stop loving you and won't pay. So, you need to grow and spread your content. The young man begins to try himself in new genres. He tests stand-up comedy, physical exercises, cooking, singing, and magic tricks. And all this brings a new audience and more donations. At night, he now does gymnastics with the girl he likes. And then he buys medicine for the man. But trying to make the purchase, he makes some mistake and ends up in the room of a woman who is showering at that moment. She is outraged by such a bold intrusion and considers him a kidnapper. The young man struggles to explain that he is also a prisoner. She suggests setting rules, and the man joins their conversation. The woman asks him about the time he has spent in the bunker and hopes that someone tried to escape. The young man remembers how he hit the monitor, and this clearly did not please their owners. The woman thinks that they need to analyze these cases and find a vulnerability in the system. The young man says something about escape and is immediately deducted donations, indicating the existence of security. The woman does not understand the purpose of what is happening. If they wanted to punish them, they would just lock them somewhere and leave them to die without food and water. But they are fed and even provided with comfort. Apparently, the key question is, why them? Who were they before all this? But the young man admits that he wasn't someone important. But here, he got the opportunity to live much better. Soon he invents a small show with socks and entertains the viewers with mini performances, which pleases the man and increases donations. One day he gifts the woman a shower curtain, which angers her because she is used to being independent. In the following days, the young man begins to teach people to draw, but since he himself can't draw, the lessons are humorous, and he himself poses as a model. The viewers like this, and the young man buys furniture for his room with the donations. One day, the woman can't stand it anymore and suggests starting a revolution, calling for an uprising of everyone else. A scandal breaks out among the trio, as the man is convinced that it is here that they got the opportunity to live better than before. That night, the man becomes ill. His cough chokes him, and suddenly he has a seizure, as a result of which his face presses against the monitor because he cannot move. The young man appeals to all subscribers for help. Maybe someone knows what to do in such a case. At this time, the woman tries to find a menu in the computer, but she accidentally presses some button, and suddenly the man's room starts burning, and he burns in front of his friend's eyes, unable to help himself. This causes despair and tears, and for a while, the pair do not communicate. But one night, the young man contacts her, trying to convince her that she is not to blame for what happened. He performs a show for her. Suddenly, she confesses that she wants to get drunk. They order alcohol for themselves and remember the last moment of freedom. Neither of them remembers how they ended up in the bunker. Then people dance in their cells. Later, they remember the old man, and the young man says that he still hears his voice. Suddenly, he admits that she was right, and maybe there are others who can replicate her action. Find a function visible only to them. If they all act together, maybe they can break free. The young man goes live and tells the audience about what happened. He points out oddities in the system where unknown functions sometimes appear, and if they can use these functions to hack, maybe the bunker will open? Suddenly, the athlete joins the conversation, who likes her current state because she decides how to spend her day. And right now, she will take care of herself, so she says goodbye to her new friends. The young man and the woman start reviewing all the strange things that the surrounding bloggers send, and some warmly support the pair. Later, he contacts the athlete again, and she reveals his secret to success. He makes people smile, which is very valuable. Misfortune exists everywhere, but so does happiness, so it's a person's own choice. She encourages him to breathe with her when the woman joins in. She analyzed the unknown functions sent to her. Someone can control the ventilation, and someone can even move the walls. She thinks these are different rooms located at different distances. Therefore, a map of connections needs to be built to break them. Although some do not want to destroy this world, the young man asks not to rush things. Suddenly, the woman takes scissors and cuts her hair, explaining it as a distraction for the bunker creators. If they don't react to their dangerous conversation, then they can be distracted by some actions. Later, the young man starts dealing all the numbers in a row and finds a novice like he once was. And at night, he joins the athlete, who calls on everyone to be happy here and now and not try to destroy reality. A dispute starts between the women, where the athlete accuses the woman of violence against others, and she expresses the thought that the athlete is their kidnapper. The young man fears that if nothing works out, he will be left without an audience, and what will he do then? But later, he still goes live and asks to show how many people are with him now. The number of votes rises to several million, causing his delight. The athlete is outraged. The young man surpassed her in channel reputation and demands to stop all this. A real conflict starts between the women. The athlete demands that others stop influencing the system while the woman asks to increase their efforts. And suddenly, the woman's room ignites and a downpour falls on her rival's room. The young man watches as both of his friends perish and can do nothing. He cries when a door opens behind him to a bright sunny day. Not believing his eyes, he approaches the threshold, but then his monitor comes to life, and the young man begins to doubt. He returns to the screen and shouts into it that they managed to do it. There is nothing that cannot be done together. But while he rejoices, the door closes. Thinking, he starts playing his role again, while the number of votes and donations on his monitor rapidly increases. Through the characters, one can observe the stages of a person's immersion in online existence when a gadget becomes a mediator between the personality and others. It can be said that this is a story of life, with many good intentions and talents, but trivially spent on the pursuit of likes.
Hello everyone, today we'll be talking about a fantasy action film called The Great Wall. Be ready for some spoilers ahead. A long time ago in the outer edges of China, a group is being chased by the warriors of Mongolia. In order to escape from the enemies, the leader William tells his men to cut loose the horses in order to lure the scavengers away, giving them the opportunity to run. At night, while trying to recover from the earlier fight, the man reveals that they're mercenaries here to find the mysterious black powder. Their journey has been perilous from the very beginning, losing more than 20 of their men in the process and leaving little resources left. Just when they're contemplating about retreat, a creature from the shadow attacks the group and kills all the remaining warriors, leaving only William and his friend Tovar behind. The animal circles back again to attack, but William is able to strike the monster down and cut off its arm. Not sure about what they just killed, the dude decides to leave immediately as their campsite is obviously not safe anymore. They continue traveling the next day, but is quickly found by the Mongolians once again, forcing them to run for their lives as the enemies chase closely behind. The two eventually arrive in front of the Great Wall on the outskirts of China and is quickly stopped by a barrage of arrows that barely misses them. With little choices left, William decides to surrender to the Chinese instead of being captured by the Mongolians, hoping that the former can spare their lives. The commanders of the Great Wall are shocked to see the giant claw that William has brought with him, and Commander Lin demands to know where the main character has acquired it. When they hear the man say that he killed the monster by himself, the Chinese commanders laugh at William mockingly, not believing a single word he said. However, Strategist 1 thinks that the foreigner's stories may be real, as the men's weapons and clothing are covered in the creature's blood. Before they can decide on the two men's fates, a scout rushes in and reports that they have spotted enemies from the observation towers, rushing towards the wall in great numbers. General Xiao immediately orders the armies to get ready for battle, and the two men are quickly taken onto the wall, where a large army of soldiers in colorful armor stand by for the siege. William is amazed to see the glory of the army, as the soldiers all work together perfectly despite their different roles, which are indicated by their armor's colors. What stands out from the rest of the army are the soldiers in blue, which are led by Commander Lin and composed of only women. They all march towards the edge of the wall and prepares to battle by using the giant spears. The soldiers all wait patiently for the enemies to come, and their attentions are quickly drawn towards the far distance as a horde of gray monsters charge towards the wall. General Xiao quickly orders for the artilleries to attack, and numerous fireballs are thrown into the air by massive machines, heading directly towards the enemies and creating a sea of flames upon impact. The archers also begin firing at the monsters, showering them with a barrage of arrows that cover the entire sky, killing many of the creatures while they rush in without hesitation. The monsters roar furiously as they run closer towards the giant wall, eventually reaching the base despite the onslaught of arrows. The women in blue armors begin to drop down towards the creatures, striking the enemies using their spears while the men quickly pull them back up. Despite their tremendous efforts, many of the soldiers are killed by the monsters as they're eaten alive. Very soon, the queen of the monsters arrive in the far distance together with her numerous bodyguards in order to command the battle more effectively. Strategist 1 sees this and tells the general, who orders the artilleries to fire directly towards the queen, but the bodyguards are able to block the attacks quickly, protecting their leader in the process. The queen roars furiously towards the humans and begins communicating with her minions, ordering them to change their strategy and use their bodies to climb the walls. The monsters are able to climb the structure very quickly and begins mauling the soldiers, throwing them off the wall using incredible strength. William desperately tries to break free with Tovar after seeing the dangers, and surprisingly, they're released by another foreigner named Ballard who cuts their ropes immediately. A young soldier named Pan sees his comrades being killed and rushes in to attack the creature despite his fear, but gets pushed back easily by the giant monster. Before the young man can be killed by the voracious creature, William jumps in the air and grabs onto a spear, charging at the creature and stabs it right in the mouth. The monster pushes the man backwards as it roars continuously, but William is able to stab it again with Tovar's help, and the two kills the creature by piercing his heart. Tovar takes a red cape on the ground and begins attracting another monster like a bull, causing the creature to charge directly at the man. But this allows William to kill it by using an arrow and barely escapes the blinded creature as it launches for the last time. After seeing so many of his minions killed, the queen orders the creatures to retreat by using her sound waves, making the monsters fall back as they carry the bodies of their fallen comrades away, preventing the humans to learn anything about them. The Chinese commanders approach the Westerners after the victory, and the two men drop their weapons immediately to show their cooperation. General Xiao praises their bravery for aiding with the battle and decides to offer them a living quarter instead of locking them up. The young soldier Pan goes to William right after the siege and thanks the man for saving his life instead of leaving him for dead. The two also meet Ballard, the man who freed them earlier, and it turns out that he was also here looking for the black powder 25 years ago, but is kept hostage as a teacher of English ever since. The old man shows the two the mysterious black powder that they were looking for, and assures William that there's more than enough for all three of them. Ballard proposes that they leave as soon as the siege begins, so that they can be riding away while the battle rages. Before their conversation can finish, Strategist 1 calls them for an urgent meeting as he found a magnet inside their belongings. Juan believes that the stone was the reason why William was able to kill the monster so easily during their first encounter, as the magnet may have interfered with the creature's mind. It turns out that the monsters are called Tao-Tes, and they landed on Earth 20 centuries ago from outer space. Ever since that day, the creatures rise every 60 years to attack from the north of China, trying to devour everything so they can feed their queen in order to multiply. The capital of China has 2 million people and is only about 300 miles away from the wall. If the creatures obtain such large amounts of nourishment, their numbers would explode, spreading to every corners of the world. At the same time, General Xiao has noticed missing personnel at the West Towers and proceeds to investigate alongside Commander Lin. The soldiers go into their formations, but the men are surprised that the monsters have purposely left the bodies instead of devouring them as food. The soldiers march forwards after noticing one of the creatures in front of them, but General Xiao also sees the reflections of a second Tao-Te from behind, trying to ambush the team. The two monsters attack simultaneously, and the general tries to fend off the Tao-Te from behind, but ends up mortally wounded by the creature after trying to save Commander Lin. The entire army arrived soon after, but it was too late to save their leader. With his last breath, General Xiao declares Lin to be his successor and warns her to never underestimate the monster's intelligence ever again. A massive funeral is orchestrated as the people mourn for their leader's death, sending numerous candles flying in the air to light the way for General Xiao as he enters the afterlife. Very soon, Envoy Shen from the Emperor of China has come to the walls, bringing records of the encounters of the monsters from 60 years ago. Apparently, the previous general recorded that the creatures became paralyzed after chasing the soldiers onto a mountain, where a magnet is also present similar to William's. In order to verify how the magnet actually affects the creatures, William suggests that they capture a Tao-Te by using a hook, similar to how a whale is captured. But Tovar is extremely unhappy with his friend's proposed involvement, reminding him of their plan to escape with the black powders. Strategist 1 begins concocting a large amounts of anesthetics and putting them on the hooks, preparing to capture one of the creatures alive. Very soon, the Tao-Tes begin to arrive in masses while they try to sneak onto the wall, and the soldiers defend against the monsters by attacking in their formation. Giant blades protrude from the walls and cut the creatures into pieces, while the warriors attack the Tao-Te furiously as they fight on the edges of the building. Lin orders to fire the harpoons, and the giant hooks launch towards the enemies, hitting many of the monsters and trapping them with the chains. However, the creatures soon realize the people's intentions to capture them and begins ripping apart the hooks, all breaking free from the restraints except for one. At the same time, Dowler is trying to convince Tovar to leave the wall right now while the battle is in place, but the man refuses to abandon his friend. William is also contemplating about abandoning the Chinese army, but in the last moment, decides to return to help the commanders capture the last Tao-Te that's in chains. In order to isolate the creature from the others, the army fires numerous bombs around the monster, creating a field of flames that surrounds the entire area. Realizing that the chains won't last much longer, William drops down into the fields by sliding across the meadows and finding the monster unconscious on the ground. He ties the creature up so that it can be retrieved, but is quickly attacked by hostile enemies as he tries to fight for his life. Luckily, the man is saved from the ambush as Tovar appears to the rescue, saving William in the process and blaming the man for not following their plans to escape. Their arguments are interrupted when more Tao-Tes begin to attack from the fogs, but the two are able to kill the creatures together by using their teamwork and shooting the monsters in the eyes. As the fight continues, the monsters begin to bypass the wall of flames and surrounds the men in large numbers, charging directly at them. But the Chinese army is able to fire numerous bombs at the location, killing the Tao-Tes with explosions and saving the men's lives. They quickly put the giant beast inside a cage and begins experimenting the magnet's effects on the creature. Surprisingly, as one approaches the monster alongside the rock, the creature eventually stops moving altogether, proving the effects of the stone. Envoy Chen demands to bring the Tao-Te to the Emperor right away despite Wan's protest, but the order came directly from the king himself. After the envoy leaves the wall, the army detected more movements from the monsters at the base of the building and begins to investigate as the armies descend to the bottom. To their shock, the creatures have dug a giant hole through the base of the wall, using the previous battles as nothing more than ploys to blindside the armies. Meanwhile, Balor and Tovar are stealing the black powders and plans to escape the Great Wall as the armies are busy investigating the monsters, but they're stopped by William, who wants his friend to stay and fight for a greater cause. Tovar believes that William is blinded by optimism as he thinks that the people have no chance against the monsters' armies. While they're arguing, Balor knocks the main character unconscious, telling Tovar to leave his friend behind as this would be their only chance to run. General Lin soon discovers the escape of the Westerners and is furious at William for his betrayal, despite the man claiming to have tried to stop his friend. Her anger is only tempered when she hears the young warrior Pan, who vouches for William as he claims to have witnessed the man trying to stop the escapees. She orders to have the traitors captured right away and locks William in the cell so that he can no longer interfere with the army's plans. In order to catch up with the hordes of Tautais, Lin decides to use the hot balloons as a method for travel, but the inventions are not tested and poses great danger for its users. Numerous people died as they tried to ascend into the skies by using the black powders as fuel for the vehicles, leaving only a handful of soldiers heading towards the capital. Pam releases William soon after, and the man rushes to the outside where he meets Juan, demanding to know what's going on. The strategist tells him that they have failed to prevent the Tautais from breaching the walls, and the general has ordered for his release as she heads towards the capital herself. Juan tells William that the only chance they have now is to kill the queen, as her death will also disable all her minions. Instead of leaving like Juan suggested, William decides to go after Lin so that they can save humanity from being destroyed. At the same time, General Lin has arrived inside the capital, only to see that the place is overrun by the voracious creatures. They try to make it to the palace, but are quickly attacked by numerous Tautais and grounded by the creatures, while they desperately fight for their lives. Lin is quickly surrounded by the monsters as they roar furiously at the woman, but before she's killed, William arrives to her rescue and grabs her into the air, using the grenades to repel the monsters as they fly into the palace. They're able to retrieve the Tautai that was captured earlier, and Juan decides to load the creature with bombs. They plan to travel inside the sewers and feed the monster before releasing it towards the queen so that they have a chance to kill her by using the explosives. However, their plan doesn't go smoothly as the creatures have discovered their location and kills the majority of their team, leaving the young warrior Pan wounded but still alive. Suddenly, numerous Tautais charge into the underground tunnels, and Pan decides to sacrifice himself by blowing up the grenades, killing the monsters and blocking the pathway as well. Not having any time to mourn, Juan quickly opens the doors to the outside and they release the monster that's tied up with the bombs. The creature wakes up immediately after the magnet was removed, and just like they planned, it begins devouring the meat that was provided and runs to the outside, trying to give it to its queen. The three arrives inside the tower, and Juan stays behind to guard the door using the magnet, as William runs to higher grounds with Lin, trying to get a clear shot at the bombs. The man launches the arrow at the queen, but the bodyguards are able to block off the attack as it bounces off and explodes in the air, alerting the monsters in the process. William quickly goes up the tower to try again, but the queen orders all her minions to attack the buildings, causing all the Tautais to rush inside, as one throws the magnet towards his teammates before being devoured alive. The man tries to shoot a second time, but it was still blocked by the creatures and the arrow explodes in the air, allowing the queen to finally see her attackers and orders all her minions towards them. With only a single bomb left, the two leaps out from the windows as they swing from the ropes, evading the Tautais that jumps towards them from behind. William tosses the magnet at the bodyguards and Lin throws the spear closely behind, allowing the stone to delay the movements of the creatures as the bomb lands inside the barrier. The queen tries desperately to put out the flames, but a large explosion destroys everything inside, sending all the creatures flying in the air. As the queen dies, all the Tautais are immobilized and crashes towards the ground, leaving thousands of bodies in the palace as the humans are finally victorious. Sometimes later, William rides back to the Great Wall and finds his friend Tovar in the holding cells after being captured by the Chinese army. He tells the man that the emperor gave him a choice between Tovar's life or the powders, but William chose to save his friend, realizing that friendship is more valuable than any material gains. He rides off into the far distance alongside the army's escorts, while General Lin looks at him from the walls to express farewell. William looks back as well before he leaves and has a good feeling that he'll come back to this place in the future. So what do you guys think about this movie? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like my video, please press like and subscribe for more. I'll see you guys next time.
Welcome to the show.
A man is running through a dark forest in Ireland. He seems frightened despite constantly encountering signs with the words "point of no return" and various numbers, indicating either directions or distances to something. However, he fails to escape. Darkness quickly envelops the surroundings, a flock of birds flies overhead, and he falls into a pit. In the next moment, an invisible force grabs him and drags him away. Elsewhere in the country lives an artist named Minna, who works in a pet store. One day, her boss asks her to deliver a rare parrot to a zoo in a neighboring city, and Minna agrees. She takes the bird home for the night. There, she tells the parrot that her mother died 15 years ago. Suddenly, the bird starts to respond. In the evening, Minna puts on a wig and goes to a bar where she introduces herself to a guy with a fictitious name, claiming to be a ballerina. In the morning, Minna apologizes to the parrot for her behavior, saying the real her would probably not be liked. Finally, the pair set off on their journey. On the way, her sister Lucy calls, reminding her that she has family and nieces who love and await her. Minna continues driving and eventually ends up on a road leading into an old dark forest. Unexpectedly, the car breaks down and stalls, and the connection also mysteriously cuts off. Taking the parrot's cage, Minna steps onto the road to seek help, but the forest is dark and empty. When she returns to where she left the car, the road is deserted. Minna continues to wander through the quickly darkening area, talking to the bird to keep herself cheerful and suggesting they name it Darwin. Suddenly, she notices a woman running past and decides to follow her. Minna catches up with her near a small forest cabin, and the woman, opening the door, orders her to come inside quickly if she wants to live. Naturally, Minna rushes into the cabin. The elderly woman is named Madeline. She has been living here for some time with two other young people, Ciara and Daniel. She immediately orders Minna to stand in front of a mirror because the watchers cannot enter inside but observe from outside, coming every night after sunset. Standing by the mirror, Minna suddenly hears sounds like applause. Madeline confirms her suspicions. The watchers are applauding the appearance of a new object. In the morning, Minna announces that she intends to leave. Although the others assure her it's impossible, she heads into the forest. Madeline catches up with her, explaining that the forest causes hallucinations, but it is possible to survive here. The signs scattered throughout the forest mark the boundary from which a person can reach the cabin before dark. But if you go beyond the boundary, there will be no way back. They were made by a man named the Professor. But where he is now, no one knows. That night, Daniel puts on a show for the watchers, presenting them with the newcomer, but they ask her to behave as usual. Meanwhile, Ciara turns on the music and dances, as she does every evening. Minna, on the other hand, finds discs with recordings of Love Search TV shows. In the morning, she and Ciara go to gather medicinal herbs because her missing husband asked the girl to take care of Daniel. Then the man went to search for a way out and disappeared. Ciara explains that recently they found strange burrows scattered throughout the forest. That's where the watchers go during daylight hours. She believes she has been in the cabin for almost 5 months. Later, Madeline announces the safety rules. Never leave at night, never open the doors for anyone, always try to stay in the light. Strange life begins with entirely identical days. Minna watches endless shows and often stands staring into the mirror. One day she knocks on it, and immediately there is a knock on the door. Madeline orders everyone to freeze and everything stops. The next day she and Daniel go hunting. The boy tells her that Madeline used to work at the university, so she considers herself a know-it-all. But she has been living here the longest. Daniel himself has been in the cabin for 8 months, but has never seen anyone. After listening to the boy, Minna convinces Daniel to help her explore a burrow. Using a rope, Minna descends, explores it, and finds old items, newspapers, toys, pieces of electronics, and an old bicycle, which she ties to the rope and sends up. But then strange sounds, similar to those heard at night outside the cabin walls, echo from the darkness. Minna screams and the rope falls at her feet. Climbing out into the light, Minna leaves the dangerous place, and they calmly examine the items. With the bicycle, it might be possible to escape from here, but Madeline has a rather strange reaction to this. Meanwhile, Daniel manages to assemble a surveillance system from the found pieces of electronics and installs a camera by the door. At night, everything goes as usual. Ciara dances when there is a knock on the door, and Daniel suggests that a person has come. Madeline forbids opening it, but they hear the voice of Ciara's husband. Ciara tries to prove that it is John by asking him what book she is reading, but he does not answer. Although they bought this book together on his advice, the man begs to be saved from death. Ciara asks to look into the camera, but when he leans towards it, something drags him into the forest. Immediately there is a knock on the mirror stronger than ever before. Madeline stands in front of the people, as if shielding them, and the knocking stops. In the morning, Madeline throws the bicycle into the burrow, demanding that they no longer break the rules. Later, Mina recalls her sister and mother, who invited the girls for a car ride. The weather was beautiful and Mina opened the window. Her mother asked her to close it because the wind was bothering her, but Mina didn't listen, mimicking her mother, who got distracted from the road. The tragedy happened, for which Mina still feels guilty. Winter soon arrived. The days grew shorter, the nights colder, and food became increasingly scarce. Quarrels began to flare up among the cabin's inhabitants. One day, Sierra left for the forest. Mina caught up with her, and she confessed that she felt John was real. She runs to the house from where Daniel's screams are heard, angry with Madeline and Mina, refusing to let them inside. The women hide under a tree and soon see lanky, spider-like monsters emerging from the forest, approaching the cabin window, and making terrible shrill noises. The watchers stare at Daniel and Sierra while Mina and Madeline wait for them to leave so they can return to the cabin. When they do, the women rush to the door and beg to be let in. Daniel refuses, and then Mina tells him about her guilt towards her mother. She asks him to understand that he will suffer all his life, realizing that he is responsible for the death of people. The doors open. The four of them immediately stand in front of the mirror, hoping to convince the watchers that they are in place. Madeline admits that she tried to protect them from certain things. She used to teach history and mythology, and unlike them, came here voluntarily. Only here did she realize how dangerous this place was. Once she hunted alone and saw herself at sunset. Not an exact copy, but very similar. The Watchers are an ancient species with many names: changelings, winged ones, fairies. They study people to impersonate them, and they will never let them leave. Knocks and the voices of the cabin's inhabitants are heard outside. Then Daniel finds a hatch in the floor, which they didn't even know existed. Descending, they discover a well-fortified and equipped living space filled with food and equipment. Mina turns on an old computer, and a video recording shows the face of the professor, whose real name was Rory Kilmartin. He was the first to study the Watchers and tried to learn about their origins. In 1979, the scientist found this place, which he called Wonderland. Every evening, the Watchers came to his window and studied him. For many years before this, the professor's colleagues laughed at him, not believing his tales. Then he built this bunker, using the labor of men from nearby remote villages. He chose the lonely or those with bad habits so that their disappearance would not attract much attention, as every evening he convinced them to have dinner outdoors. Hiding inside, he watched the Watchers deal with them. Thus this bunker was built on blood. One day, a Watcher appeared before him in the form of a girl with red hair. She was very different from the others, as if she were unique and looked curious and harmless. That's when he realized that if he unlocked the secrets of the fairies, he might even conquer death. He did the impossible, lured this girl into a cage and began experiments on communication, trying to befriend her. She changed form, sometimes turning into a frightening creature with long arms, but seemed to listen to him. Gradually, she became close and understandable to him, but now the professor realized he had achieved nothing significant and was ready to end his life. He hid a boat by the river, and this is the only way out. Just follow the birds. He asked the survivor to go to his university office and destroy all the documents found there, and now he will go to her and stay here forever. In the last recording, they see Kilmartin climbing up. Gunshots are heard, and then all is quiet. Realizing that this is their last night in the forest, Sierra turns on the music and invites Daniel to dance, but he seems upset about leaving. He says his family is dysfunctional and he has nowhere to return to. Then the girl offers to let him stay with her for a while until they find him a good occupation and place to live, as they have become good friends. In the morning, the group sets out to escape, guided by the signs and Mina's parrot, whom she asked to lead them. Soon they reach a massive stone disc in the ground, covering the entrance to a huge tunnel. Madeline explains that this is where the last representatives of the ancient fairy race were locked up, who were once very friendly with humans. After many centuries, they managed to surface, but now the friendship has turned into hatred. They stay here because they are held by magic, so they need to run far away. They walk all day. Dusk falls, but there is no river or boat in sight. It starts raining, and they fall into despair when they see huge flocks of birds flying in one direction. They run after them and reach the river. The women rush to the boat when Daniel hears screams behind him and sees John. He returns for him, rejoicing that the man survived, but it turns out to be a changeling. The women scream, begging Daniel to run, but he doesn't hear and dies at the hands of the Watcher, who then takes on his form while Madeline, Mina, and Sierra sail down the river. The women wake up in the boat and see that they have returned to civilization. They stop a bus and ride to the city, listening to music and only now realizing that it's over. Later, Mina goes to the university where Kilmartin worked, posing as his niece to enter his office and fulfill his last request. There, she finds more documents, photos, and a recording in which he discusses the fairies and the fact that there are still half-blood children in the world. Mina finds a stack of photos and, looking at them, seems very surprised. In the evening, Mina goes to Sayara's house, showing a photo of Madeline from the professor's belongings, explaining that it is his wife who died several years ago. So the Madeline they lived with in the cabin was a special fairy capable of moving during the day. It was she whom Kilmartin caught. He couldn't kill her, and she took on Madeline's form to return to civilization. Then a car pulls up to the house, and the real Ciara gets out, while the one she's talking to is actually a fairy. Realizing she has been exposed, the fairy knocks Mina out and changes shape again, turning into Daniel. They just want to live like other species. But due to human hatred, they are forced to stay underground. The fairy turns into Kilmartin and goes to Mina. In the house, the fairy transforms into her and prepares to kill the girl. But Mina says that there are others like her somewhere because she is half human and acknowledges that it was unfair of humans to banish the fairies from their world. The fairy softens and spreads her wings, admitting that Mina might be right, and she flies away. Mina revives Ciara. Later, she reunites with her twin sister Lucy, finally forgiving herself for their mother's death. She tells her about her experience, admitting that she still sees Madeline appearing in the forms of other people. Her nieces arrive to show Mina a drawing of her and Darwin, whom she still keeps as a pet. Meanwhile, outside, a girl with red hair appears, looking at their apartment windows and taking on the form of a girl with a strange face. This is probably not a horror movie, but rather a scary bedtime story when a child doesn't want to sleep and asks for something frightening. Everything builds up slowly and tastefully, but the ending unfolds somewhat mundanely, although mysteriously. Evening supermarket. Near one of the shelves, a young man is talking on the phone with his wife. The woman is irritated, and the guy is trying to justify himself. He didn't intentionally almost buy the wrong product, and his purchase of a PlayStation has nothing to do with it, and they wouldn't have been able to relax in a Lupka even with that money. He went there for work. At the checkout, there are 3 people in line. The first is a man who looks a bit homeless. The cashier announces the total, and the man is short of 10 rubles. He tries to persuade the cashier, but she remains firm. So the man turns to those waiting in line. If they care about the fate of a person, they should lend him the missing amount. He asks them to think that they are all preparing for a terrible judgment. And what will they be able to tell when facing the Almighty? While the man delivers this speech, people react differently. One person leaves the line altogether. The man turns to a young guy. It seems like he's not destitute. So, what are 10 rubles to him? A woman standing behind him takes out a coin. The man thanks her and says that angels won't forget her, and perhaps this act will outweigh all her sins. Then he takes out 50 rubles from his pocket and gives it to the cashier. He returns the coin to woman, places a 10-ruble coin on the counter, and tells the young guy that he will need it. The man adds that he will have something to remember. In hell. The homeless man leaves, and the young guy makes the payment. The cashier asks for change, 10 rubles, and he hands her the homeless man's coin. The young guy exits to an empty parking lot. He continues his phone conversation, again justifying himself for some business trip and a woman whom his wife is jealous of. He sees the man who was sitting on the curb earlier. He approaches and gives him the coin because he doesn't need someone else's. The homeless man asks, is he afraid of burning in the fiery Gehenna? Perhaps he believes in the Lord? The guy confesses that he's not very religious, to which the homeless man inquires, so, after death he plans to become worm food? Is that the pinnacle of his life? The guy says he's a mathematician and believes in the exact sciences. He asks if there's any evidence of God's existence. The homeless man claims there is an undeniable fact. The guy starts making fun of him and suggests taking a break from doing nothing on the way back. The homeless man starts crying. The guy is confused about what upset him so much. He reassures the homeless man, telling him he's young and he has everything ahead of him. It's the right time to think about the future because it all depends on him. By the way, he mentioned earlier that he can provide evidence of God's existence. And the homeless man calmly says that he saw Jesus himself because he is the eternal Jew. the one who didn't let the Lord rest at his house when he was carrying his cross. He told Jesus that he would rest on the way back. Jesus agreed, but he would have to wait for him. The guy asks again, and this happened 2,000 years ago. The homeless man understands that it does indeed sound strange. He was amazed at first too, but then he got used to it. So, for him, the existence of Jesus Christ is a fact. However, he can't prove it in any way. He didn't keep a piece of clothing that Jesus wore, and how could he prove that it wasn't a piece of his own underwear? He doesn't have the cup from which Christ drank or the stone from under his cross. The guy concedes that the Jew saw Jesus. What was he like? The homeless man says he was just like everyone else, only tormented. He also doesn't remember his face. The guy remembers all the faces he's seen in his life. The guy is puzzled and asks again to tell him what happened. The Jew says that Jesus was being led past his house under guard. He stopped to rest, and the Jew forbade him to lean on his house. After all, he called himself the Son of God. It was outrageous, so he told him that he would rest on the way back, and God ordered him to wait for him. He couldn't know who he really was, and no one could. The guy asks if the Jew is ashamed that he didn't let Jesus rest. The homeless man asks, maybe that was God's plan? The guy asks if he tried to make amends for it. Maybe become a clergyman, for example. The conversation partner admits that he tried that many times, but no one descended from the heavens, and no indulgence was granted. The guy asks, what else has he been throughout all these years? Maybe an immortal killer. An immortal killer, that would be cool. The Jew objects. Being immortal is cool in movies, but in real life, you need to find food, seek warmth, and wait, like waiting in line. He has already studied all the ads on the walls, all the holes in the couch, but people keep coming and going. It's no longer interesting to him who stood where in the hierarchy, whose place was more comfortable, who jumped the queue. The guy inquires, what is he waiting for? The second coming, or the end of the world? The homeless man nods, maybe both. No one knows when the end will come. The guy is puzzled again, but an ordinary person is afraid of death. So is the homeless man. He's eternal, but if you cut off one of his fingers, he won't keep living with 4 fingers. He's broken his bones many times. But what if a tank shoots him in the head? Will he be an undying headless man? The homeless man confidently says that won't happen. Hasn't he tried to end his life himself? The Jew nods. Of course, he even tried to hang himself in the very beginning. He hung from a tree for 2 weeks with excruciating pain in his throat until the branch broke. Later, in 1945, he was captured by the fascists and got scared. He tried to shoot himself. The gun jammed. It was exploded, shredding his whole arm with shrapnel. But everything healed. He came to Russia from Poland 40 years ago. The guy is curious again. Maybe he's just schizophrenic, and doesn't it bother him at all? How did he decide that all these events were real? The homeless man shows his arm. He made notches. 920, 1464, 1812. Decades pass. And he sits and thinks, maybe he scratched them yesterday, put the dates, as if 200 years had passed. And he asks for help to figure it out, like stabbing him with a knife, for example. But the guy refuses. He doesn't want to explain to the police that he saw Jesus and shouldn't have died. The homeless man shrugs, saying, that's how it works. They walk across the parking lot. The guy asks him to tell something from history. For instance, what was happening in the 1st century? The homeless man responds, well, in general, it was the same. Shepherds herded sheep and fishermen fished. The guy insists, but in the world, the significant appearance of Jesus, church reforms, any mysteries and intrigues? The homeless man, in puzzlement, asks, where does he know all this from? He also learned it from books. Now, the guy remembers where he was in August 2000. Throughout the ages, he just lived. He was in different countries. It's just that the body requires a warm place and a piece of bread. As for how neighbors reacted to him being eternally alive and forever young, they didn't pay much attention to him, and he didn't stay in one place for long. Does he know ancient languages? He does, but now they are considered dead, and who can verify them? The men touch upon the topic of space. The homeless man has seen many strange things, but he hasn't encountered extraterrestrials. The most pressing question, can it really be that in all this diversity of worlds, there are no other forms of life? The guy comments that it's all too profound for a homeless, possibly heavy-drinking man. The homeless man leaves, and the guy locks his car and follows him. He asks, why did Jesus punish him? Shouldn't he be all-forgiving? The Jew says that it wasn't Jesus who punished him at all. He cursed himself with his own words, and the Lord simply fulfilled his own wish. The biggest curse is not that he's been waiting for 1,000 years, but that he, like a dull shepherd, remained the same. A person who creates, lives a spiritually enriched life. The guy doesn't believe it. It just can't be. After all, he's been living for so long. He knows much more than others. Surely he met great people like Michelangelo or Nietzsche. To this, the homeless man retorts, "How can you understand what they'll say about this specific person after death, that he was a genius?" The guy asks how people lived, what they thought and what they believed in 1,000 years ago. The homeless man responds, "They believed the earth was flat, that God sat in the sky above the clouds and watched every step. But if he is simply looking through our own eyes, then he is just an observer, and he can't judge us for our actions, right? It means he is concerned about our actions only as much as they concern us. And if God is in everyone, then so is the devil." The guy teases him. Those are some profound words for a weird man. The homeless man smiles. In a certain sense, a person always has a choice. And fate exists. The fate of a person is determined by their choice. But at any moment they can stop choosing that fate and start choosing another. So why, even in the modern world, are people willing to kill those who don't share their faith? You just need to make an effort to keep your opinion about someone else's religion to yourself. A person finds something sacred for themselves, and it gives their life meaning, but then they start comparing their primary gender characteristics. They try to prove that their meaning is more significant and more important than another person's. Of course, it leads to conflict. His wife calls again. The guy apologizes and says he hasn't finished yet. He met an interesting person and got engrossed in conversation. She says she'll come over now. He goes back to the homeless man and sits down next to him. The guy asks, why is he homeless if he's so intelligent? And why doesn't he want to change anything? The homeless man says he's living like he's preparing for a big exam, postponing the transformation of his life for later. The conversation partner says he's living somewhat similarly, but he doesn't want to think about death. He's still very young after all. The Jew reassures him, you won't even notice how it passes. No matter what a person does, middle age arrives, and then old age. And deep down, every old man feels like a little boy. The guy says he doesn't want to think about old age and death. Probably that's why people invented religion, to make it seem like there's something after death. Then he smiles and says that he's been clearly fooled. His conversation partner hasn't lived for 2,000 years. He doesn't seem crazy, but maybe he has a special organism. Cells divide more frequently, the body constantly regenerates, unique genetics perhaps. Probably they can make medicine from his blood. It can't be that he hasn't done anything remarkable throughout his life. He was in Poland during World War II. Did he hide Jews? The Jew laughs. He is a Jew himself. It was a Polish family that hid him, and then they were discovered and taken as prisoners. That's when he tried to shoot himself. The guy laments, well, yes, times were tough. The homeless man disagrees. Times are always the same. The conversation partner is astonished, but how can that be? Everything has changed in the world. If you trace history from the Middle Ages to the present day, a lot has changed. The Jew says that everything changes if you pay attention to those changes every day, just like a river flows, rages, and is never the same. However, the way that river flowed 100 years ago is the same way it flows today, in the same channel. The guy becomes more animated and asks the homeless man what he thinks about the paradox of faith. Can God create a stone that he can't lift? The homeless man explains, it's a paradox of the mind. If he's a scientific atheist, he'd agree that all information about the surrounding world enters the mind through the senses. The idea of God is in his mind, so the problem is in his mind. God in your mind can't create a stone in your mind that he's about to lift in your own mind. The guy is puzzled, but if he can't lift it, then he's not all-powerful. The homeless man advises him not to overcomplicate things in his mind. The conversation partner sighs. He would like to get some answers. The homeless man says he would like to get some answers too. For example, he wants to know what our purpose is, or what happens after death, or what one needs to accomplish in life. Then he asks the guy what he personally would do if he lived for 1,000 years. Seeing the guy pondering, he concludes, he would simply live and nothing else. On the first day, he'd jump for joy. And then? The guy is puzzled. How can one realize oneself as an immortal person then? After all, if humans are God's creations, why did he create them? There must be some meaning to it, right? The homeless man agrees. There must be, but he doesn't know it. And he doesn't know a single person who has realized themselves. Even those who entered history feel like something is missing. Take Hitler, for example. Even if one imagines that he genuinely believed in the ideas he propagated and wanted to change the course of history, did he realize himself? No. He spent his entire life becoming and embodying the caricature of a villain with a mustache. Did he realize the spark inside him, the one that made people stand up and follow him? He doesn't know if one can realize themselves within the framework of our world. So how can a person get to heaven if there's a devil inside them? The homeless man says that all human emotions are manifestations of fear. The part of a person that lives in that fear experiences eternal torment in hell, but the other part of them is love. Even in the Bible, it's written that God is love. To get to heaven, one must choose God within themselves. The guy asks, "Are you God?" The homeless man laughs. He's unpredictable. Sometimes he calls him a homeless man, and sometimes God. He's a human being, but in him, just like in everyone else, there's a bit of God, a bit of love. But surely God must have had a purpose for him. He can't just have left him to live forever and await the end of the world for no reason. There must be meaning in all of this. And the Jew retells Plato's words. Horses are born and die, but they're just embodiments of the idea of a horse, which lives forever. Likewise, people are born and die, but they're just embodiments of the idea of a human, which lives forever. It will live until the end of humanity. Their meeting has no symbolism. He can consider that he just met the idea of a human, which he's always met, even in the mirror. All of them are embodiments of the idea of a human. Tall, short, sad, happy, lazy, successful, full, gloomy, and open. They all think they are unique, but new ones come to replace them. Year after year, century after century, they were children yesterday, and today they are already old. But even so, new ones come to take their place, running, jumping, munching, and leaving in just the same way. A phone notification rings. A woman walks around his car in the parking lot. The guy introduces the homeless man, saying he's the one who has seen Jesus himself. The woman thinks he's mocking her. She drove across the entire city, and he's here with a vagabond. The guy tries to explain. Then a man with the same face as the homeless man approaches and yells at him. He's been looking for him for over an hour. Bags won't carry themselves. The homeless man leaves with him. The guy is bewildered. They are identical. The woman says he's gone mad and gets into her car, driving away. The guy gets into his car and looks in the mirror. The eyes of Ahasuerus are looking at him.
One day, an 11th grader named Nikolai comes to school and immediately gets into trouble with his classmate Victor. Victor is upset about an unflattering comment about their mutual love interest, Nastya, appearing on the board. Victor drags Kolya to the classroom, but Kolya tells everyone that this is nothing compared to what awaits them in the future. After all, an alien spaceship is already on its way to Earth. However, the pilot made a mistake and arrived in the wrong place, accidentally catching the signal of Kolya's best friend and avid gamer, Fima. Thanks to this mistake, Earth will soon join the Star Federation, which will immediately accelerate progress in all areas of knowledge and medicine. But in 2110, military conflicts will begin with the Cosmic Pirate Alliance, led by Glot, who can travel through time. Humans had a tough time until a special squad led by Kira was sent into battle. She will reach Glot and sacrifice herself to destroy him. Kira will leave behind a daughter, Alice, who will study at the same school as Kolya, but 100 years in the future. However, Alice finds studying completely uninteresting. Some of her classmates of alien origin pay attention to her and offer friendship, but the girl's mind is occupied with entirely different thoughts. On this day, she returns from school, greets the robot Werther, and shows off new bracelets that allow for creating combat simulations. Werther immediately helps her pass a level, fighting 3 space pirates at once. At the most inopportune moment, her father, Professor Seleznev, appears in the simulation and gets hit in the nose. Alice immediately stops the fight and helps the injured. Here, the father notices the bracelet, which turns out to be sent from the military academy named after her mother, where she applied for admission. The man is outraged by her decision, but Alice reminds him that after the battle, her mother's body was never found, so she could very well be somewhere in the past. Alice takes her father to the tree growing in the middle of his biolaboratory. An unmistakable heart silhouette, 100 years old, is visible on the bark. Could this be a message from her mother? Moreover, the robot has already found a similar woman in the past, a physics teacher from Moscow named Margarita. Coincidentally, she turns out to be Kolya's teacher, and in her time, she is rushing to the classroom where the boys are sorting things out. Understanding the situation, the teacher stops the fight. Kolya gets a reprimand and is ordered to erase the nasty comment he wrote on the board. Kolya and Fima go to the classroom, but the permanent marker doesn't come off, and Kolya decides to find a more effective solution in the lab. He breaks the doors, climbs to the top shelf where some vials are stored, and drops a water-filled lens, but it falls to the floor in a kind of slow motion. Kolya tries to find an explanation for this effect. Examining the wall, he finds a hidden safe, from which he takes out a box containing something strange, resembling a small galaxy. Suddenly, this object gets absorbed into Kolya's palm and he starts to convulse, while a voice whispers to him that the Cosmian has reappeared in the system. Terrified, Kolya runs into the corridor, and then outside. But the schoolyard around is completely different. There are many aliens around the school. Eventually, Kolya bumps into Alice, who, without understanding, performs a move and throws the boy to the ground. He sees the girl and is at a loss for words. Then he complains of feeling unwell, causing the girl to laugh. Is his biodata chip not working? Kolya doesn't understand her sarcasm and asks to call an ambulance. Alice then realizes that something is wrong with the boy. Besides, he is dressed very strangely. Kolya shows his pass, a badge, and the girl asks him to look around. Realizing that this is the future, the boy loses consciousness. Meanwhile, in a space prison, a pirate named Jolly, because he is always laughing, escapes from his cell, comes to the cell of the space pirate Glot, and admits that he has been recognized as the captain of the Alliance. But Glot reminds him that without the Cosmian, they won't be able to conquer even the most underdeveloped planet. He can feel its waves and can find it. Jolly agrees to cooperate and frees Glot. Glot uses his mental powers to force the guards to self-destruct, and the pirates escape. Meanwhile, Kolya regains consciousness and is frightened by the robot Werther. Alice confirms that it is the year 2124. She shows him a view of a futuristic city with blooming sakura and white bridges. The temperature is now controlled by humans. Machines are used as needed. The meat they eat is artificial. At this time, Professor Seleznev comes to the laboratory. Learning that the boy somehow traveled from the past, he begins the analysis and finds that Kolya's body contains a cluster of exotic matter with variable gravity, what they call the Cosmian. Kolya explains where and how he found this object. Learning that his physics teacher is named Margarita, Alice immediately understands that this is her mother. After this news, the father shows Alice a letter. In it, the missing wife explains that because of the Cosmian, she ended up in 2014. The problem is that with its help, one can only move exactly 100 years. Kira changed her details and hid securely so that the pirates wouldn't find her. She asks her daughter to look after her father, and she will always be proud of her. Alice runs out of the room in tears. Kolya rushes after her. Alice, sitting under the tree, tells her virtual father everything she thinks about him. Werther leads Kolya to this place and explains that meeting oneself in another time leads to a continuum failure. And then the space pirates appear. Glot captures Kolya with his mental power, but Werther manages to activate the alarm signal. Glot reports that they can't take the Cosmian while the boy is alive, and the pirate Jolly prepares his weapon. But Alice rushes into the fight, using bionic arms. The professor appears, trying to stop the fight. However, Kolya, obeying Glot's mental power, shoots the professor. An energy release occurs, and reality begins to change. Alice, Kolya, and the pirates find themselves in the middle of a highway in 2024. Alice and Kolya run away, and Jolly chases them, jumping on cars. Werther helps the kids, and when the pirate catches up with the pair and stabs Alice with a sword, it turns out to be her hologram. Then the pirate cuts the robot in half. Angry, he complains to Glot, but Glot takes control of a motorcyclist and knocks his partner down. However, Jolly gets up and finds Kolya's pass card on the road. Now he knows which school he attends and plans to do without Glot. Meanwhile, Kolya and Alice ride away from this place by subway. Kolya takes the girl to his home. He explains to his mother that Alice lost her keys and cannot stay outside, and she allows the girl to stay overnight. At night, Kolya admits that he writes texts and performs rap dedicated to Alice. This makes an impression on her. Meanwhile, Jolly tries to get to the school, but taxi drivers take him for a lunatic. So Jolly grabs a smartphone with a mapped route from one of the taxi drivers and heads to the place on foot. and physics teacher Kira sees a news report about the incident on the road and recognizes the pirate Jolly. The next morning, Kolya brings Alice to school, where Nastya mistakes her for his new girlfriend and starts to harass the couple, not letting them pass. Then Kolya sees his physics teacher Kira, catches up with her, and starts telling her what happened. But the woman notices Fima and is puzzled because he should be at Kolya's apartment playing. The conversation is interrupted by the appearance of Jolly, who, seeing Kira, proposes to settle the matter peacefully. But the woman engages in a fight. The pair wreck everything around, and eventually, Kira ends up in the physics classroom, where Alice, Kolya, Fima, Nastya, and her new boyfriend Victor are hiding. They barricade themselves inside, Jolly breaks in, and Alice asks Kolya to take them to the future. But to activate the Cosmian, strong emotions need to be evoked in Kolya. And when the pirate breaks through the wall, Alice kisses Kolya. Temporal vortices start immediately. Taking advantage of the pirate's confusion, Kira cuts off his arm. The whole team is transported to the future. However, it is not at all a wonderful place. The school is destroyed and battle robots are flying outside. Kira hits one of them with a sword and its outer mask falls off, revealing the robot assistant Werther underneath. He explains why the world has changed. It turns out that in the original story, Fima, on the day of Kolya's first transfer to the future, went to his apartment to play in a gaming tournament and accidentally received the signal from the lost alien courier, which led Earth to join the Star Federation. But in the new reality, Glot, who ended up in the past, directed Fima to school instead of the tournament and took the signal himself. Earth turned into a Pirate Alliance outpost, enslaving humanity and forcing them to work for a bowl of soup. Werther leads the team to Jolly, who has hardly aged over 100 years. It turns out that he was the one who saved Werther, disguising him as a pirate bot. Kira doesn't believe the pirate, but he convinces the team that he is now on their side. And all these years, he has been craving revenge on Glot for betraying him, although by the oath, he cannot harm him personally. If they destroy Glot, everything will return to normal. 100 years ago, Fima received the signal. So they need to go to Kolya's apartment and stop Glot in the past. Kira, Kostya, and Jolly head to Kolya's apartment to thwart Glot's plan. Meanwhile, Fima suddenly wonders why Glot didn't track their move. The friends conclude that it is a trap, and indeed, they fall into a pirate ambush. Their friends rush to their rescue, and Victor destroys the attackers with a bomb found on Jolly. But it also collapses a huge building on the street. Frightened Kolya tries to save his friends and moves them to the past, to their time. But he returns to the future, where a fierce battle with the surviving pirates is underway. Jolly locks Kira in a room, taking the blows on himself and receiving a fatal wound. Glot appears, happy to announce that he is now free from the oath. He waits for his former comrade to die. In the past, Kolya's friends run to his apartment where they find Glot. In the future, Kolya, Kira, and Alice also arrive at Kolya's apartment. He tries to move to the future, causing the realities to fluctuate, merging and diverging. In the past, friends beat each other on Glot's orders. And in the future, also under Glot's influence, Alice starts to strangle Kolya. She tries to resist Glot's mental command, but she can't. Kolya dies. Glot of the future receives the Cosmian. Alice, freed from his influence, rushes to revive Kolya, but it's all in vain. But when the girl starts crying over him, he suddenly opens his eyes. At this time, Glot absorbs the Cosmian. Alice tells him that her mother is still alive and she can defeat him again. But he reminds her that 100 years ago, in this apartment, he killed Kira and Kolya's friends. Kolya disputes with Glot, claiming that in the past, his friends can still defeat the pirate. Angered, Glot offers him to see it for himself and moves them to 100 years ago in the past. But when Glot, Alice, and Kolya arrive in 2024, the future Glot meets the past Glot, causing a continuum failure, making Glot multiply first and then disappear. This was Kolya's plan. The unclaimed Cosmian begins to work on its own until Kolya reaches for it. However, the resulting anomaly throws Alice and Kira into 2124. Kolya ends up in an intertemporal space, from where he is thrown into his 2024. He wakes up in a hospital, where the jubilant Fima reports that he managed to receive the signal from the alien courier, and this restored history to its original course. Kolya realizes that the Cosmian inside him is gone, and now he can no longer travel through time, and he will never see Alice again. Meanwhile, Alice and Kira find themselves at their home and see their husband and father alive and well. It turns out Kolya wrote him a warning letter that was delivered 100 years later, and he managed to substitute his hologram under the pirate's shot. Later, Kolya and his friends plant a tree as a symbol of caring for the future. Kolya draws a heart on the tree, and Alice receives this message in the future, understanding that the boy remembers her. This is where the movie ends.
One day, an unidentified flying object lands on Earth, after which a crystalline tower grows above it. However, all attempts to make contact prove futile. Sometime later, astronaut Nico receives an offer to lead a mission on the spaceship Salvare to the presumed homeland of the object in the constellation Canis Major. A month into the journey, Nico wakes up on the spaceship, although they are still far from their destination. The spaceship's artificial intelligence, William, informs her that Earth's scientists miscalculated the system's coordinates, and now it will take about 7 more months to reach the aliens' planet. Nico orders the crew to be awakened, who are surprised by her appointment as commander. Moreover, the ship dangerously approaches Sirius, risking an accident. Meanwhile on Earth, Nico's husband Eric begins studying the artifact. On Salvare, Nico decides to bypass Sirius and orders the crew to be put back to sleep, but the crew sides with the former captain Ian and puts Nico to sleep despite her resistance. Ian directs the ship as close to Sirius as possible. The engine's power drops and it shuts down. Nico forces herself to wake up, takes manual control, and saves everyone. At this time on Earth, the alien object suddenly starts sending signals in the form of musical compositions transmitted by Eric. In space, it turns out that all communication in the sleep system on the ship are disabled. Additionally, Ian cannot accept his defeat. When they try to fix the ship together, he stabs Nico in the back. However, she pushes him into an electrically charged wire, killing him. Later, Nico informs the crew about this, which again causes scandals. In the midst of the argument, an accident occurs, causing the ship to start losing oxygen. They have only 5 hours before complete unconsciousness, and the engineer finds a nearby planet with oxygen. After some time, the crew finds a planet where a special mineral, ring woodite, containing oxygen, can be mined in caves. To fly to the planet, Nico wakes up the second pilot, CAs. Part of the crew descends to the planet and finds a cave full of the necessary crystals. While working, the engineer opens her helmet because the oxygen level is 19% and she can breathe perfectly. Finally leaving the cave, the astronauts see a rising moon they somehow missed. Nico has to command an urgent takeoff. The ones left behind see the ship take off. People think Nico abandoned them to die when a shuttle piloted by her descends nearby and the captain picks up the crew members. On Earth, Eric takes their little daughter to the artifact, where he states that the aliens might be trying to communicate. As if they wanted to do something bad, they would have done it already. Meanwhile on the ship, one of the girls, Petra, suddenly falls ill. Tests show elevated stress hormones. Nico asks to move them closer to Sirius when suddenly the temperature inside Salvare rises. The captain takes manual control but suddenly loses her vision. It turns out her stress hormones are off the charts as well. Astrobiologist Julian quickly identifies a high level of boron in her blood, checks soil samples taken from the planet, and reports that he has isolated a virus from them. The crew gathers to discuss the situation. Unexpectedly, Petra feels something growing from the back of her head. It turns out to be her nervous system, which kills her. Julian starts working on a vaccine and injects it into himself, but he realizes that he is experiencing the same symptoms as Petra and persuades a friend to throw him into space. He complies, but while working on the medicine, realizes that gamma rays kill the virus. Nico directs the ship towards Sirius, exposing the crew to radiation, which cures them. Later, Nico wakes up to loud banging and sees an injured engineer, suspecting that someone on board is hunting them. It turns out that AI William is offline for some reason. Nico and CAs carry the engineer to the infirmary when they are attacked by an alien. The crew searches the ship and tries to eject the dangerous alien into space, but it tears people apart until Nico lures it into an airlock and kills it. All this turns out to be just a bad dream. However, waking Nico up doesn't work until William finds a way to enter her dream. Seeing him, the captain realizes she must accept what happened to her first ship when she had to sacrifice part of the crew to save the rest. Nico finally says goodbye to her fallen friends to move forward. She suddenly wakes up. She is informed that they have encountered a moon along the way where fresh supplies can be obtained. Moreover, William has detected the same signal as on Earth. They look at the moon's surface and see the same alien object. The Salvare crew heads towards it. The alien object looks abandoned, and people realize it is much weaker than the one that arrived on their planet, and there are no living creatures around for some reason. Nico asks engineer Sasha to take a sample, while she and CAs inspect the surroundings and find a fragment of the artifact. At this time, Bernie is attacked by an unknown creature and bitten on the leg. He experiences pain, and his skin turns green. Meanwhile, Sasha explains to the artifact how Earth is structured when something grabs him and pulls him inside. Meanwhile, CAs and Nico find a forest covered with flowers that cause a strange feeling of euphoria. When the effect wears off, the astronauts return to the artifact, where Sasha tells them he had a strange dream. The group heads back to Salvare when they notice a spider-like creature rapidly approaching. However, the astronauts manage to escape. They go through decontamination, not noticing a small alien creature that infiltrated the ship. At this time, Sasha unexpectedly sees his doppelganger, and William suggests the idea that the artifacts are research probes, similar to those humans send to unknown planets. Suddenly, the AI starts flickering, and a fire breaks out nearby, which CAs rushes to extinguish. However, William does not appear. People try to bring the AI back online, but they fail. Sasha continues to see his doppelganger, and the engineer finds the alien. After repairs, William finally returns, but suddenly he starts seeing fires everywhere that aren't there. He initiates a protocol that splits the ship into two parts. Nico goes into open space to check the hull. Suddenly, the captain is thrown away from the ship, but as soon as Nico examines the accident site, Salvare activates an energy shield and it disappears. Alone in the cosmic void, Nico tries to establish communication. CAs does the same, although some of the crew are convinced of Nico's death. She has only 4% oxygen left when she sees Salvare passing by. Nico uses the remaining oxygen to send a signal, by which she is found. The captain explains where exactly the malfunction occurred, and the crew rushes to fix it. However, the system reports a breach in the seal. While fixing the damage, the engineer dies. However, William returns. Sasha reviews the scan results of his brain and deletes the file. Meanwhile, on Earth, Eric suggests working with the artifact using light, which leads to success. Suddenly, a door opens beneath the artifact. They send a drone inside. However, the signal is lost, and Sasha's image appears on the monitors. On the ship, Sasha eavesdrops on a conversation about the upcoming arrival in the Canis Major system and the danger of dark matter. Meanwhile, on Earth, Eric volunteers to enter the artifact. However, the signal is immediately lost. Instead, Sasha appears before Eric and leads him to an auditorium where he and Nico met 20 years ago. She recounts their first date, proving it's her. However, Eric realizes it's an alien and starts asking questions. Nico shows him calculations on a board, and Eric easily solves an unsolvable theorem on Earth when his daughter calls him. He exits the artifact and faints. Meanwhile, on Earth, the minister decides to enter the artifact with the military. Eric rushes after them upon learning this. His daughter cleverly follows him. On the ship, programmer Javier tells Sasha that their ship can direct an energy beam to destroy an entire planet if the aliens are hostile. Sasha corners Javier, ordering him to explain how to disable William and destroy the ship. His eyes turn white, and two needles emerge from Sasha's eyes, piercing Javier's eyes. Strangely, his father, the minister next to the artifact on Earth, sees all this. The artifact starts to blacken, and a massive sound wave knocks everyone down. Eric finds his unconscious daughter on the ground. Meanwhile, Salvare enters a massive dark matter cloud. People see lasers shooting past them. William notes elevated hormone levels in the entire crew. It seems dark matter increases serotonin levels. The lasers are charged hydrogen particles, and everyone is experiencing hormone effects similar to illegal substances. Sasha watches the merry crew. Later, he disables access to ship controls. His double, visible only to Sasha, suggests waking all the engineers to figure out how to disable the planet killer function. However, William's scream is suddenly heard. Meanwhile, on Earth, it turns out Jana has developed acute leukemia due to the artifact. On the ship, the malfunctioning AI William tells Sasha how to reboot him. Later, the team finds a CT scan of Sasha in deleted files and realizes he is no longer human. An alien parasite is in his brain. They hear the second pilot's screams and see strange tendrils emerging from Sasha's eyes, reaching for the pilot's eyes. Nico and CAs manage to save the pilot, lock Sasha in the control room, and activate the alarm. Nico realizes the aliens chose Sasha as the crew's killer because she treated him dismissively. Then she notices William also looks strange. He needs a backup, but those files are no longer available. On Earth, a journalist who visited the artifact agrees to an alien implant and now says the aliens are called Akaya. The energy surge was defensive, not knowing Jana had a genetic anomaly. However, the Akaya can cure her. Meanwhile, the engineer connects Salvare's cooling systems, but Sasha disconnects them again. They go back and forth until Bernie electrocutes the system and himself simultaneously, breaking all connections. Sasha then tries to cut off oxygen supply to all lower decks, but a severe headache starts. He admits it's not him, but Akaya, opposing the captain. Nico asks him to convey to the aliens that they don't want to fight, but if he kills everyone on the ship, it will force humanity to act with force. Nevertheless, he cuts off the oxygen, directing the ship towards a black hole. Nico orders an evacuation to shuttles, but plans to stay on the ship and fix the situation. After seeing everyone off, she meets AI William and begs him to return. However, Sasha attacks, grabs, and chokes her. Nico loses consciousness. She wakes up next to William and recognizes that the implant in Sasha's head has a powerful energy source. This means it could be used to generate the impulse needed for flight. Meanwhile, the crew hears Nico's voice. She reports that William is back with her and they can return. Sasha's brain has become an energy source. Soon, Salvare reaches its destination. The astronauts head towards the Akaya city but decide to land nearby. CAs and Nico reach the caves, where they spot a winged alien. Nearby is an alien AI that suddenly speaks to them in Earth's language. It turns out they've been intercepting all human signals sent into deep space for the past 100 years. The AI explains that Akaya is 427 light-years from this planet, called Zakir. It advises not to seek Akaya but to hide from them, as they only seek destruction. Meanwhile, Sasha's double mocks him, and the real Sasha wants only one thing: death. On Zakir, William contacts the planet's AI and learns there are 336 enslaved star systems in the Akaya kingdom. If Akaya have been to Earth, humanity is doomed. Sasha provokes the doctor, forcing him to destroy him. After dissecting Sasha, scientists study the Akaya implant. Trying to save the dying Javier, they insert the reprogrammed implant into his head. Meanwhile, Nico and CAs find a place littered with bones and discover an Akaya implant inside one of the skulls, similar to the one in Sasha's head. The women realize that war is inevitable and decide to destroy the Akaya probe on Zakir. Nico approaches the Zakirans, who ask for their help. One of the Zakirans, captured by the Akaya, attacks the shuttle but dies in the engine fire. Salvare, on Nico's orders, fires an energy beam at the Zakir artifact, destroying it. Suddenly, William reports the approach of 5 alien objects, identical to the one currently on Earth. In the next moment, Akaya destroys the planet Zakir. On Earth, Eric carries Jana to the artifact, asking the Akaya to save her. The artifact opens its doors. The journalist tells her followers that the Akaya want to be friends with Earth. In space, the crew of the ship is shaken by the destruction of the planet. Moreover, the debris from Zakir hits part of the ship and kills a crew member. Nico orders everyone to head to the cafeteria, and she herself goes there through the air duct. The ship's protective screen may not hold, so they need to get out of the blast wave urgently. Meanwhile, William has to confess that based on Sasha's alien implant, he created another AI, half human and half Akaya. The commander demands to destroy it, but it assures them that it is not dangerous to humans. Nico has to wake up programmer Richard, who suddenly wonders why Nico was given such an incompetent team for such an important mission. He talks to the AI, and it chooses the name Yara and changes its appearance. It knows nothing about the laws of human robotics and has no connection with Akaya, but it was humans who first destroyed the alien Akaya probe without any reason on the planet Zakir, so they will have to at least explain themselves. Meanwhile, on Earth, Eric carries Jana to the Akaya probe, where a hospital bed is immediately provided for the girl. In space, Nico can't believe in Akaya's peaceful intentions and orders the Salvare to leave immediately. However, holes appear in the ship's hull. 2 engineers go into space to repair the ship, but suddenly Akaya ships appear near the Salvare and open fire. The engineers die, and Nico wonders why didn't they finish them off. Yara contacts Akaya, who declare that they want negotiations with Nico. On Earth, the Akaya probe closes its doors, leaving Eric outside. Meanwhile, on the Salvare, Nico asks CAs to try to return to Earth because she has already started a war. Sometime later, Nico heads to the Akaya ship on her shuttle, losing contact with the Salvare. Soon, Nico sees a wonderful light ahead and enters it. Many glowing beings swirl around her until the woman suddenly finds herself near her daughter's bed. Jana wakes up and calls her, but Nico doesn't believe in the reality of what's happening. The girl talks about her illness, and the mother gives a ring. Jana runs outside where Eric meets her. Nico also runs after and suddenly finds herself in front of her mother. Nico suddenly realizes that her mother's image was borrowed by the aliens. Akaya confirmed this and asked Nico to inform Earth about their peaceful intentions. However, Nico is sure they have different understandings of good. She accuses Akaya of destroying an entire planet, but the alien reminds her that the Zakirians were killed because of Nico's actions, bombing the probe. At that moment, Yara appears next to them. Akaya accuses the AI of serving humans, grabs Yara by the throat, and pushes her back onto the salvare, where she tells the crew what she saw. Meanwhile, Nico argues with Akaya, proving she is ready for negotiations. The simulation changes, and Nico finds herself at her daughter Jana's funeral. Eric accuses her of abandoning the family, to which Nico responds that between family and humanity, she would choose the latter. Outside the simulation, Nico sits with her eyes closed while a small spider-like robot climbs over her body. In the simulation, Eric suddenly attacks her, and Nico has to fight. She wakes up and finds herself crushing the robot. At this time, CAs finds her and takes her to the shuttle. On Earth, Jana gives her father's wedding ring to Eric. On the salvare, they notice the appearance of Akaya's ships, so Richard orders to prepare for light speed and asks Yara for help, promising to disable her control. Meanwhile, Nico and CAs see the ship taking off, leaving the women on the enemy's vessel. Akaya immediately sedates CAs, who finds herself in a simulation with her long-dead brother. Nico realizes that Akaya is chasing the salver. On the ship, William detects a gravitational wave behind them, which Richard interprets as the Akaya ship. However, he hopes that CAs and Nico are still alive and arranges a meeting with Yara in the cryo chamber, where he goes to wake up Engineer Dylan, who has combat experience. Meanwhile, CAs tries to determine if her encounter with her brother is real. Suddenly, she hears Nico's voice trying to reach her mind. Then Akaya transports CAs to her friend's wedding, but CAs demands to be released and to take the probe from Earth. Akaya insists they are trying to save her planet from humanity's problems and crimes. Nico, realizing that all chances for peaceful negotiations are lost, launches the shuttle and initiates its explosion so that the salvare can reach Earth. However, the shuttle stops and Akaya attacks Nico. Nico tries to hit her, but the alien throws her away and announces Cass's readiness to obey. However, she begins to fall apart when the Akaya ship suffers serious damage. The salvare crew tries to understand what's happening, and Dylan identifies the impact of an energy burst from a neutron star. William detects the damaged Akaya ship that has stopped nearby. Apparently, neutron stars affect them differently, but the main thing is that he doesn't detect any signs of life on the enemy ship. Meanwhile, Cass's simulation turns into a tragedy. She sees her dead friends. Anthony still tries to get her consent to cooperate, but unexpectedly dies. It turns out it was Nico who ripped off the Akaya implant from her friend, thereby ending the simulation. On Earth, Eric discusses the situation with the ring with his colleague because he is sure it was on his wife's hand on the day of departure. The man goes outside, where he is kidnapped by a masked stranger. He wakes up in a basement where the kidnapper warns him that Akaya is not Earth's friends. Meanwhile, Nico and CAs head to the shuttle and see the salvare nearby, which is experiencing another energy burst from the neutron star. Unlike Akaya technology, it remains almost unscathed. Richard realizes they could create neutron weapons against Akaya and orders to prepare for return to Earth without considering Nico and CAs. Nico contacts the salvare using a helmet, which William hears. The women prepare to return to the salvare when Akaya addresses them. Begging to be saved, they swear they won't harm Earth, and people believe the aliens. Nico and CAs return to the salvare, where Richard explains that Akaya spaceships are susceptible to neutron flashes. Dylan proposes to tow the Akaya ship beyond the reach of the neutron star, and Nico approves. People manage to start towing, but the artificial gravity on the salvare fails. Nico has to make a tough decision and leave the alien ship to be destroyed. Later, William reports that the power shutdown was initiated by Yara. However, she insists she didn't sabotage the ship's thrust. Meanwhile, CAs calls her friends to show them a habitable planet. Nico asks to wake up the chief colonist. At this time, Dylan slows down Yara's data processing and finds navigation structures. Although this causes the AI great pain, it doesn't stop Richard. Yara's screams are heard by Nico. She orders to stop the torture despite Yara confessing involvement in stopping the Salvare's engines. After that, the commander asks Yara for forgiveness, but she no longer trusts humans. Meanwhile, CA's wakes up colonization specialist Paula. William suddenly notices that some hidden process is running through his code, as if the AI was damaged, but when Dylan opens access, an AI named Gabriel appears before them. Meanwhile, CA's, Bernie and Paula settle on the new planet, which is rich in fauna. On the ship, Gabriel introduces himself to Nico and says he is the original AI that was supposed to be on the Salvare, while William is an inferior version. That's why William woke up the wrong team, couldn't detect the moon, and created the alien AI. William confirms his words, and yielding to Gabriel, he shuts down. Yara stands up for William, but Gabriel reports he found a way to get them home faster. On Earth, Eric continues to walk around the alien probe until it opens a door in front of him, and Akaya appears in the form of his double, who promises him a meeting with his wife. On the ship, AI Gabriel wonders why Yara didn't ask Akaya how to become free. Dylan informs Nico that he checked Gabriel's code and found he doesn't know when it was created, as if he had rewritten himself. Nico asks to disconnect Gabriel and calls Yara when Dylan suddenly feels strangled and passes out. Nico also loses consciousness, unaware that Gabriel is changing the ship's course despite Yara's protests. She hacks into Gabriel's memories and learns that during the test, it was he, not William, who failed all tests and was to be deleted. Yara recalls her experience and tortures Gabriel. Meanwhile, air supply is restored, people regain consciousness, and William returns to find out the truth. However, Gabriel fights him, and Yara realizes their codes are too intertwined, so both must be deleted to try to restore William later. Dylan performs a reboot. Meanwhile, the colonists try to contact the Salvare but get no response. Paula suggests naming the planet, where she has already found many useful minerals, but people don't know they are being watched by the local civilization. On the ship, Dylan brings William back, but it's his early version, lacking memories. At this time on the planet, people wake up to a noise near the shuttle, go to the sound, and find strange tracks. Paula notices some creature and shoots it, then they are lifted onto the ship, where the doctor immediately starts analyzing the tracks in the blood of the unknown creature. Paula shows how many useful minerals the depths of the discovered planet hold. Moreover, it is very close to Earth. Meanwhile, the doctor reports that the creature's blood was yellow due to the lack of hemoglobin, similar to terrestrial insects. Nico decides to fully analyze the planet. Meanwhile, Richard and Yara study Akaya's route and realize that they are always connected, and see how cosmic strings are formed, serving as a source of energy for the aliens. At this time on Earth, Akaya tells Eric that they want to see humans on Earth, but not in space. The alien gives the man a sphere that will help restore nature on Earth. On the new planet, Paula is analyzing the composition of the trees when a large wooden stake flies into them, followed by a creature emerging from the bushes. It seems to be trying to talk to CA's, but Paula shoots it, and it dies. Later, CA's tells Nico about the creature, which she describes as having war paint and being armed, but Paula characterizes them as cavemen. However, Nico reminds them that according to the rules, they cannot colonize a planet with an existing civilization, but Paula refuses to leave the paradise place. Meanwhile, Yara explains to the commander how Akaya's cosmic strings work and suggests doing the same. Dylan starts testing and stabilizes the wormhole. It soon shuts down, but people manage to get data from Earth. On the same day, CA's discovers that Paula launched colonial capsules on the new planet without permission. She points a gun at her. Nico is just watching the messages received from Earth and realizes that her meeting with her daughter was real. Apparently, Akaya can send not only information but also matter through wormholes. At this time, CA's and Paula fight because the colonist doesn't want to return to Earth. Nico releases her team and informs the crew that they are preparing to return home in a new way. The Salvare begins its journey through the wormhole. They can already see Jupiter, but the wormhole dissipates earlier than expected. Nico orders everyone to move to the lower deck and takes manual control, splitting the ship into two parts. At this time, Yara confesses to Richard that she could never forgive him, therefore she blocks his path to Earth. Nico says goodbye to CA's and asks her to tell what they have learned about Akaya and to protect Earth. Then she initiates manual control, which separates the lower part of the ship. She watches as the Salvare goes through the wormhole and smiles, but then Richard approaches her and tells her about Yara's actions. The commander isn't angry because she has a plan. Meanwhile, Eric and his team test the sphere given by Akaya. They lower it into a polluted lake in the middle of a wasteland. There is an explosion, and the desert is covered by an ancient forest, with the soil beneath it pristine. The excitement is interrupted by a report of instability in the Jupiter area. People realize that a wormhole has formed there and something is moving through it. It's the scifi entering the solar system, but CAs forbids contacting Earth for now, where Eric is just making a report that they witnessed the creation of an entire ecosystem, proving Akaya's good intentions. On the scifi, they watch the broadcast and develop a plan to hide the data on using neutron radiation as a weapon against Akaya. CAs learns about Yara's actions. The AI behaves strangely, and CAs ask Dylan to heal her because she is the only chance to reopen the wormhole and save Nico and Richard. She then starts a broadcast, introducing herself as the commander of the scifi and announces that Nico sacrificed herself to save others. Eric calculates that Nico has more than 2 weeks of oxygen left and can still be saved. He and his colleague Seth go to the Akaya probe and ask for help, but it remains silent. Suddenly, a door opens in front of Seth and the man steps inside. Meanwhile, on the ship, they seek a solution to the problem with Yara, as the Akaya code can read the data about the neutron weapon. On Earth, Seth returns from the Akaya probe and reveals that he has accepted an Akaya implant into his brain. Meanwhile, Dylan finishes uploading Yara's matrix to the shuttle's mainframe, announcing that she is ready for departure. She thanks William for her creation and leaves, thinking she is returning to space. CAs warns the crew that they must keep the information about Akaya's vulnerability to themselves until they understand how to use it. On this day, the scifi returns to Earth. Eric rushes to CAs and asks for help to save his wife, but Yara is gone, and Akaya does not want to help. However, CAs manages to whisper to him about the secret materials. Then the crew is taken to hidden underground rooms where they are held illegally. Seth admits that he installed a bug on Eric and knows about his visit to the resistance group against Akaya. Now his people are killing the resistance fighters. Meanwhile, on the shipwreck, Nico builds a solar sail to travel to the colony planet. They have 10 days left until arrival, so they have enough oxygen. One day they suddenly hear some knocking, but Nico dismisses it as a meteorite. But the next day, Nico sees an increase in estimated time. People throw unnecessary items into space, reducing the arrival time. That day, Richard hears a noise but can't figure out what it is. Later, Nico finds abandoned items, realizes that someone is on the ship and suggests to Richard that they search it. Armed, they check all the corners. In one of the halls, Nico clearly sees Akaya, but it turns out to be just scraps of plastic bags. Then a signal about damage to the outer sail comes through. Nico goes to the airlock, where she suddenly sees glowing Akaya beings. However, Richard tries to convince the captain that she is hallucinating. Meanwhile, on Earth, CAs admits to Eric that she doesn't remember their conversation about hiding the secret. The man suspects that Seth erased the astronaut's memory. Meanwhile, William tries to recall everything his prototype knew. He allows Yara and the hologram of Nico to merge with him into a single whole and remembers everything that happened during the space journey. In space, Richard discovers that the hallucinations were due to too high atmospheric pressure, but now everything is fine. Suddenly an alarm sounds, and they see a ship that does not belong to Akaya. Later, Nico finds herself tied to a table. Richard, and then she, are cut with a laser, causing the woman to lose consciousness. When she wakes up again, she sees some liquid pouring over them. Waking up again, they find that they can move, and there are no scars on their bodies. However, they are clearly being watched. Apparently, the aliens were studying their physiological reactions and would punish them if the pair refused to follow their rules. They go to the open door, but when Nico moves forward, the door closes, separating the pair. Meanwhile, on Earth, Eric helps the scifi crew remember the information deleted from their brains. And everyone confirms that Akaya promised to do one thing or another in exchange for their loyalty. William tries to contact Eric or CAs, but Seth blocks him. At this time, Nico and Richard walk through the corridors of an unknown alien ship, receiving electric shocks for wrong actions. Suddenly, a door opens in front of Nico. She steps inside, touches an object, and sees a crashed alien ship on an unknown planet. Richard, whose hand is burning with a red bracelet, finds her there, but when they try to leave the room, the doors separate them again. This time, Nico steps outside and sees snow in the same ship from the vision. Nico goes inside, grabs something like a jacket from the dead creature, and finds a weapon. While exploring the ship, Nico sees a wounded Paula, who tells her that they were attacked by aliens called Dakuma, who killed all the colonists. She can't escape because she is already infected and is turning into a Dakuma herself. This is indicated by the red color of the bracelet. The aliens can't live here because of the cold, but they need the crystalline core that Nico was apparently sent for. Paula begs Nico not to let her turn into a Dakuma, and Nico kills her. She continues to move forward and finds the creature's severed arm, which she uses to activate the ship's control. Meanwhile on Earth, Eric helps the Salvare crew escape. At this time, Nico returns to Richard, unfastens his bracelet, and the pair tries to escape, but there is no way out, and Nico challenges Dakuma, threatening to blow up the entire ship. Dakuma comes out and strangles her, but Richard activates the cooling system and freezes the alien. Later, Nico cuts off Richard's infected arm and immerses his body in the regeneration liquid. Nico wakes up the restored Richard and activates the Dakuma ship's systems. She suddenly notices Akaya probes. This means the aliens are aware of each other. She decides to ask Akaya for help to return to Earth, but for this, she needs to get inside the Akaya probe. Meanwhile, CAs and Eric reach the Salvare and call William, but he does not respond, as his developer Ursula and Seth are working on him, planning to destroy him. At this time, on the Dakuma ship, Nico and Richard find various weapons belonging to captured species. Richard dons armor and steps onto the unknown planet first. Struggling to get used to the thin atmosphere of the planet, they find a cave where the Akaya probe is located. In the cave, they find inscriptions on the walls and the bones of creatures that once lived there. Suddenly, the probe opens its doors in front of them, and the pair steps inside. At this time, Seth tells William that Nico and Richard are on the planet Chitala, and he orders Eric to be brought to him to implant his head. William immediately informs Eric about this, and although CAs tries to protect him, Eric is captured. William tells him that his wife is alive, but to bring her home, he must accept the implant into which William will be uploaded and become the new William in a human body. Eric agrees, and Seth immediately kills the guard, from whose mouth an alien spider emerges and moves towards Eric. However, William refuses to continue until Nico and Richard are safe. Seth immediately mentally transports himself into the probe, meeting Richard and Nico. Receiving consent to accept the implant, he announces his intention to open the door to Earth for them. At this time, CAs enters the room, and while she hits Seth, Ursula volunteers to help William, having seen what Seth is capable of. Taking advantage of this, Nico and Richard run through the door and find themselves on Earth. Seth reports that Akaya is angry and their ships are ready to attack. The survivors joyfully communicate by radio when they are met by the military, and Nico asks them to hurry and prepare the army for Akaya's attack, especially since they know how to kill them. Meanwhile, Eric and William adjust the Salvare's thrusters, turning it into a neutron weapon. Suddenly, a signal indicates the appearance of a wormhole between Earth and Mars, from which an Akaya ship emerges, and the Salvare destroys the alien ship. Everyone is happy that the neutron weapon worked. The commander and Nico recognize that relations between humanity and Akaya are bad since the aliens spread death everywhere, but Seth is sure it's quite the opposite. At this time, people detect dozens of opening wormholes, and Seth makes new demands to accept Akaya's ships in implants, and most importantly, to destroy the Salvare. Then Akaya will spare Earth. Later, Nico and Eric see each other again. He returns of her wedding ring, and she gathers the team and announces that a total of 59 Akaya ships have been detected. Then William suggests studying the debris from the already exploded ship where a captive Akaya is found, who behaves very quietly, apparently due to the lack of a power source. During the study of Akaya, it is revealed that Akaya is a highly developed AI that captures the universe by destroying biological life. Then Dylan proposes using a computer virus that will be implanted in a human. Then it is necessary to implant the Akaya implant into the infected human to infect the entire Akaya system with the virus. CAs volunteers to be a test subject. While discussions are ongoing, Nico quietly reaches Akaya, announcing that he can return to his kind within her. Eric tries to stop his wife, but is too late. She accepts the implant, and Eric releases the virus. Then CAs leads Nico inside the probe. They are met by Akaya, who says there will be no negotiations because humanity is a cancer in the universe. The alien taunts Nico, turning into people close to her and saying hurtful words. Suddenly, Eric sees the probe begin to disintegrate, and Akaya starts to feel pain. Nico shoots him with his own gun, grabs CAs, and they leave the probe, which is eventually destroyed. After all the events and victory, Nico finally embraces her family. Unexpectedly, the commander reports that new wormholes have opened. Signals come from all corners of the universe. Thousands of alien civilizations reach out and thank them for being the first to fight back against Akaya, instilling hope in other civilizations in the universe. This concludes the series.